Hey guys. Tonight we begin with the glitter-soaked reality of being medieval rich, the kind of wealth that lets you dine beneath chandeliers made of antlers, while peasants outside argue over who gets the least moldy loaf. You walk through drafty halls in silk that costs more than an entire village earns in a year, pretending you enjoy lute music even though the musician is definitely missing 2 strings. It is a world where luxury means spices that have traveled farther than most crusaders, and status is measured by how many servants you have dusting your tapestries just so you can ignore them. It is absurd, extravagant, and sometimes strangely tender, the way only a world stitched together by candlelight and insecurity can be. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake before the servants knock, the way you always do, in that strange, soft moment when the world is still deciding whether to be mourning. The room is dim and hazy, warmed by a fire someone else tended hours ago. Hearth smoke drifts in slow ribbons toward the rafters, mixing with the faint scent of expensive linen, the kind woven by hands that will never sleep in fabrics like this. The blankets are heavy and indulgent, thick enough to smother an entire flock of sheep, and you lie very still beneath them, listening for any sign that the day might start without your permission. It never does. Being wealthy means the morning waits on you like an anxious courtier, eager to please but terrified of making the wrong move. The window shutters are cracked open just enough for a shy sliver of light to sneak through, turning the dust motes gold as they dance above your bed. You watch them swirl and think this is probably the closest thing to magic most people will ever see, though you would never admit that out loud. Nobles are supposed to cherish realism. Dreaminess is for poets, monks, and anyone who has never checked a royal ledger. A faint sound reaches your ears, the shuffle of boots outside your chamber. It is the unmistakable rhythm of someone trying very hard not to intrude, while definitely intruding. A servant coughs, the polite cough of a man hoping you are awake but unwilling to risk your temper if you are not. You take your time stretching, because wealth has taught you that time is a luxury meant to be abused. Finally you rise, pushing back the covers and stepping onto a floor so clean you almost feel guilty walking on it. Almost. The air is cool, carrying that peculiar medieval chill that seeps through stone, no matter how many tapestries you hang or how many logs you burn. You pad toward the wash basin, where water perfectly warm to noble standards waits for you. Someone had to wake up well before dawn to prepare that water, and you suspect he is lurking nearby, hoping you notice. You do not. You splash your face and inhale the mix of lavender and rose oil drifting from the cloth beside you, the scent chosen specifically to mask the natural odor of a life without indoor plumbing. A knock finally comes, followed by the softest possible voice calling through the door. Your attendants enter in a small parade of hushed efficiency. They lay out your clothes with the reverence of priests handling relics. Silk, velvet, brocade, fabrics so heavy with dye and foreign craftsmanship that you could probably use them as collateral in a minor war. They help dress you, fastening clasps and arranging folds in ways you have never fully understood. The fewer skills you must practice, the richer you feel. The fire crackles louder, as though offended that dawn has arrived and stolen its spotlight. The room brightens slowly, revealing carved beams overhead and tapestries along the walls depicting biblical scenes that look suspiciously more muscular and dramatic than scripture ever described. Every inch of the chamber radiates curated affluence. Even the chair in the corner, which you have never once sat on, probably cost enough to feed a household for half a year. But nobility is not about using things. It is about having them available, just in case you ever wake up with a sudden craving for a meticulously carved chair. Your attendants step back and bow, waiting for approval. You glance at the polished bronze mirror, tilt your head slightly, and nod. This tiny gesture releases the room from its suspended breath. Servants exhale, gather linens, fluff pillows, and begin the daily ritual of making your waking look effortless. You move toward the door, the cold iron handle cooling your palm, and inhale the layered scents of your morning one last time. Hearth smoke, linen, oil, the faint sweetness of the rushes freshly laid across the floor. As the door opens, a new wave of warmth and noise spills into your chamber, reminding you that outside this cocoon of silk and scent lies a manor full of expectations, obligations, and people who will spend the entire day orbiting your comfort. You step forward anyway, because this is what being wealthy means in this century. Dawn waits for you. The household waits for you. And somewhere in the halls below, breakfast large enough to shock a bishop waits for you too. You step into the great hall with the kind of slow, deliberate stride nobles practice from childhood, the one meant to convey effortless authority even though you definitely almost tripped on your own hem just outside the door. The space yawns out before you, cavernous and echoing, warmed by 3 separate hearths, blazing as though competing for your affection. Smoke curls upward into beams, darkened by centuries of fires, prayers, and questionable architectural decisions. The hall smells of burning oak, spiced wine, and the faint tang of polished metal, the sort of scent that whispers wealth without ever saying it outright. Your boots tap across the flagstones, each step accompanied by the soft rustle of servants who pretend they are invisible, while also hoping desperately you notice how early they woke to prepare all of this. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, catching motes of dust and turning them into drifting gold. The effect is dramatic, almost holy, and you briefly wonder if this is the sort of sight monks write about before realizing they would never be allowed into a room this lavish. Holiness is free. Wealth is not. The long tables stretch out like an army on parade. Carved trestles, linen runners, ceremonial salt cellars placed just so. Above you hang banners embroidered with your family's crest, a design so elaborate that half the peasants in the surrounding villages could not describe it without sounding like they are making it up. The hall is quiet except for the crackling of the fires and the occasional clatter from the kitchen beyond, where someone is likely panicking over the placement of your breakfast trenchers. As you continue forward, the vastness of the space seems to press outward and inward at the same time. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty in a medieval hall is never just for admiration. It is a message, a declaration, a reminder that stone and timber and craftsmanship have gathered here to support exactly one person. You feel that truth settle onto your shoulders. Not completely unwelcome, but heavier than the velvet draped over your frame. A servant steps into your path to hand you a cup of watered wine, far too early for anything stronger. He bows low, eyes fixed on the floor, hands steady only because he has spent years training them to be. You take the cup, nod, and he backs away with the precision of a man who knows nobles are unpredictable before breakfast. You sip. It tastes faintly of berries and faintly of the pressure you woke up trying to ignore. At the far end of the hall sits the dais, your seat raised above everyone else's by just enough height to communicate superiority without causing ankle injuries. You approach it the way one approaches a throne, even though this is technically not one. The carved chair waits for you, flanked by smaller seats reserved for people who pretend they do not mind sitting lower. You lower yourself into it, adjusting the sleeves of your garment with the practiced grace of someone fully aware that every movement is being watched by at least 2 terrified attendants pretending to dust nearby pillars. From this vantage point, the hall looks different. The tapestries seem less decorative and more like ancestral judges hanging from the walls, each one embroidered with forebears who definitely expect more from you. The fires look hotter, brighter, and slightly more judgmental. The silence feels expectant, It is the kind of silence that implies your ancestors spent centuries building this world so you could sit here and maintain the illusion that you were destined for it. You straighten your posture and inhale slowly, letting the warmth of the hearth seep into your bones. You feel the strangeness of privilege as it settles over you, heavy but familiar, like a cloak lined with responsibility and stitched with every rumor the household will whisper about you before tonight's meal. For a moment you wonder what it might be like to walk into this hall as someone else, someone who sweeps the floors instead of commanding the room. But the thought fades as quickly as it arrives. Roles were assigned long before you drew your first breath, and this hall was built to remind you of yours. Servants begin setting the first platters on the nearest table, their movements swift and careful, as though the hall itself might scold them. You watch it all unfold, not because you have to, but because this is what the day demands. Privilege is not loud. It is quiet, vast, and unblinking. And this morning, it watches you right back. You barely make it halfway down the corridor before the first pair of eyes flicks toward you, then away again, with the speed of someone trained to look without seeming to. The servants line the hall in their morning positions, stiff as carved figures but far more alert. They bow as you pass, not deeply enough to seem dramatic, not shallow enough to seem disrespectful, perfectly calibrated to signal loyalty without enthusiasm. It is an art, really, this invisible choreography built around your existence. You walk through it like a stone dropped into a quiet pond, and every ripple is a body adjusting to your presence. A maid hurries forward to dust a table that was already dusted 20 minutes ago. You know she is not trying to clean anything. She is trying to be seen cleaning. Visibility, for her, is safety. For you, it is scrutiny. You catch the smallest flicker of her eyes, making sure your expression remains pleasant, because one poorly timed frown could start an entire chain of whispered theories that would spread through the manor by noon. You never asked to become the household's primary source of entertainment, anxiety, and professional purpose. But here you are. You walk on, feeling the strange pressure that wealth produces. It is not heavy in the way armor is heavy. It is heavy in the way a crown is heavy, even when it is not sitting on your head. It is weight distributed through other people. They carry the wood, the water, the linens, the secrets, and the gossip that travels faster than fire in a dry barn. And because they carry so much for you, they also notice everything about you. A servant appears at your side with a cloth to polish a goblet already shining like a captured star. Another adjusts a window shutter that does not need adjusting. Farther down the hall, two footmen argue in hushed tones over whether the hem of your garment looked more blue or more green yesterday. Each one convinced the other requires urgent lessons in color perception. You have done nothing. You have simply existed within eyesight, and that seems to be enough to set the household spinning. You enter the solar, the small chamber meant for your private moments, which ironically contains more people waiting to serve you than any other room. A scribe stands ready with parchment in case you decide to dictate letters. A lady's maid hovers with a comb, though your hair is already arranged. A young page stands in the corner with a tray of fruit he is not allowed to eat, staring at it like a man memorizing temptation for future use. Their faces are smooth and polite, but each one watches you with a different flavor of anticipation, curious which version of you they will need to accommodate today. You have learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, that wealth does not buy solitude. It buys witnesses, constant ones. If you sit, someone notices. If you sigh, someone panics. If you sneeze, 3 people race to offer cloths, each pretending it is not a competition. Even your smiles must be managed. Too wide and people suspect something is wrong. Too narrow, and they assume someone will be fired by nightfall. It is a theater you never auditioned for, but you are always center stage. A steward approaches now. Hands folded, eyes lowered, but sharp in that way stewards are trained to be. He asks if you slept well, because he must ask, and you give a neutral answer, because anything stronger becomes tomorrow's gossip. He nods, already analyzing your tone, your stance, your breathing, as if your comfort determines the balance of the estate. In a way, it does. If you sneeze loudly enough, someone will blame the weather, someone else will blame the chimney, and someone in the servants' quarters will confidently declare it is an omen of political turmoil. You step toward the window to escape the room's watchfulness and look out at the courtyard below. Even there, servants bustle like bees, each one performing tasks honed over generations. They know your routines better than you do. They could predict your footsteps with alarming precision. They know which foods you prefer, which fabrics irritate your neck, which chair you avoid because it makes you look shorter. They hold these details as if they are sacred secrets, the currency of service. And yet, for all their knowledge, they will never truly know you. Their eyes interpret, but they do not understand. Their ears catch every hint of emotion, but their conclusions are stitched together from fear, loyalty, habit, and the occasional burst of imagination. You move through their world like a constellation they must map but never reach. You stand there, framed by stone and sunlight, feeling their gazes settle on your back in soft, persistent waves. Wealth gives you warm rooms, rich clothes, and endless comforts. It gives you people who rush to fill your cup and fetch your cloak. But it never gives you emptiness, never gives you quiet. Not really. You turn from the window, and half the room straightens instinctively. You have not spoken. You have not commanded. You have done nothing at all. Yet every set of eyes waits, poised, ready, as if your next breath might shape the rest of their day. You enter the wardrobe chamber the way travelers enter temples, with a mix of awe and suspicion. The room stretches longer than some manor halls you have seen in passing, though you pretend you are not impressed, because nobles are expected to behave as if mountains of luxury have always been their natural habitat. Sunlight pours through the narrow window and lands directly on the rows of garments, arranged like a rainbow, that learned the value of social climbing. Silks from the east shimmer beside velvets, so deep they seem to swallow the light, and brocades embroidered with threads fine enough to make spiders reconsider their career choices hang in patient order. You step inside and the scent of lavender sachets hits you, battling bravely against the underlying smell of wool that has traveled through more trade routes than you could list without consulting an overly confident steward. Servants stand at attention along the walls, hands folded, pretending to be impartial observers, even though they have strong personal opinions about which colors make you look dignified and which make you look like an overeager court jester. They will never say so aloud, but you can feel their silent judgment radiating through the room like heat from a forge. A maid lifts a length of crimson velvet and drapes it over her arm, letting it spill like liquid sunset. She gives a small, polite smile that says, "This one, please. Choose this one," before another maid promptly steps forward with a gown dyed in a blue so rich it could probably negotiate its own tax exemption. And suddenly they are both watching you, each attempting to look neutral while clearly rooting for their chosen fabric as if it is competing in a quiet domestic tournament. You move deeper into the wardrobe, brushing your fingers across layers of cloth that cost more than an entire village's yearly earnings. You know this because your steward once tried explaining the expense of imported dyes, and you spent the entire explanation nodding sagely while understanding almost none of it. The truth is simpler. These clothes are expensive because they tell a story. Not about you exactly, but about what you are supposed to represent. Power draped in silk, authority stitched in metallic thread, wealth loud enough to be heard before you even speak. You lift a sleeve lined with tiny pearls sewn so carefully that someone probably ruined their eyesight creating it. It feels cool and heavy in your hands, the kind of garment you wear when you intend to intimidate someone without saying anything at all. Next to it hangs a tunic woven with intricate patterns meant to suggest refinement and humility, though nothing in this wardrobe has ever been humble. The wool alone could bankrupt a small trading town if sold at the wrong festival. The servants wait for your decision, eyes subtle but sharp, tracking every flutter of your gaze as if it is a divine omen guiding them to survival. One wrong choice, and the household will buzz all day about whether you are depressed, defiant, or simply developing eccentric tastes. You select garments carefully, not because you care deeply, but because your clothes speak in rooms where words fail. In this world, fabric is diplomacy, color is negotiation, and embroidery is a threat wrapped in artistry. A footman opens a carved chest at the far end of the room, revealing folded layers of linen finer than anything your tenants could dream of touching. Nearby, a maid adjusts a mantle trimmed in fur so soft it practically melts beneath your fingers. It is impossible not to feel the strange contradiction pressing in on you. You are surrounded by beauty crafted with painstaking labor, yet you will wear it once, maybe twice, before it becomes part of the rotating display of affluence expected of someone in your position. You choose a gown at last, something elegant but not ostentatious. Though you suspect ostentatious is unavoidable when fabric alone could pay for repairs on half your farmland. The servants relax with synchronized relief, as if the kingdom's stability depends on your color palette. They whisk the garment away to prepare it, and you watch the procession with a mixture of pride and unease. In this chamber, surrounded by wealth stitched into every fold, you cannot ignore the truth. Your wardrobe is not just clothing, it is armor, currency, performance, and identity. A mountain of fabric that carries expectations heavier than steel, waiting silently for you to choose who you will be today. You sit at the long oak table as servants file in with the quiet precision of people carrying half the kingdom's food supply on a single tray. The morning light creeps through the narrow windows, pale and gentle, but everything else about breakfast is the opposite of gentle. Platters arrive in waves, bread still steaming from the ovens, a whole wheel of cheese big enough to qualify as a distant cousin, bowls of berries that somehow appeared despite the season, insisting berries should not exist right now. Then come the meats. So many meats. More animals join you at this table, cooked, spiced, and arranged artistically than most peasants see in an entire year. You try not to react as another servant sets down a glazed ham with a reverence usually reserved for relics or royal births. The smell rises in warm, sweet curls. It is delicious, but also strangely accusatory, as if the ham knows it alone could feed 3 villages and wants you to feel mildly guilty about it. You pick up your knife anyway. Hunger may be temporary, but breakfast is a performance that does not tolerate hesitation. 2 attendants hover near your elbows, pretending they are not waiting for the smallest gesture to refill your cup, replace your plate, or interpret any sigh you make as a sign that someone must be scolded immediately. You lift your goblet, and one of them practically teleports forward with a pitcher of watered wine. He pours so carefully you would think your cup contains liquid gold instead of something meant to make mornings less tedious. As you begin to eat, the hall fills with the soft chorus of servants moving dishes, shifting platters, and adjusting items that were already perfectly positioned. You know their eyes flick toward you each time you choose a piece of fruit or avoid a particular pastry. Every bite becomes data for the manor's daily gossip cycle. If you eat lightly, rumors of illness bloom like mold on bread. If you indulge too eagerly, someone down the line will whisper about stress eating brought on by political tension. You are not just eating, you are setting the emotional tone for the entire household. Your plate, despite its size, begins to disappear beneath layers of food. An omelet bright with herbs, black pudding seasoned with far too much confidence, small pastries filled with jam that tastes like it was stolen from a merchant caravan. Somewhere in the distance, a steward is probably editing the household ledger in despair as he imagines the cost of keeping your morning routine from collapsing into mediocrity. The strangest part is how normal it feels. You cut into roasted venison as easily as someone else might cut into a humble loaf. You reach for honeyed figs as if they are your birthright, and perhaps they are. That is the uncomfortable truth wealth likes to whisper into your ear. Excess becomes ordinary far faster than it should, creeping into your habits like ivy climbing the side of a crumbling wall. One day you are astonished by the bounty. The next day you are accustomed. By the third, you are debating which spice blend best suits your morning mood, as though having opinions about cinnamon is a noble responsibility. You glance at the far end of the table, where more dishes sit untouched, waiting for guests who are not present and may never be. Nobles always prepare for company, even when they do not want any. Hospitality is a currency, and this feast is its shimmering display case. You are aware that if a visiting knight or minor lord were to arrive unannounced, the servants could multiplying dishes within minutes, as though the kitchen runs on panic-driven alchemy. As you taste a spiced sausage that borders on aggressive, you picture the peasants outside your manor walls, already hard at work while your biggest challenge is choosing which delicacy to sample next. That awareness hovers at the edge of your mind, not enough to ruin your appetite, but enough to remind you that comfort here is built on a foundation of sweat you did not shed. A servant places a bowl of pottage near you, thick and steaming, as if to reassure you that not everything on the table is decadent. Yet even the pottage is richer than the version served anywhere else, filled with herbs and vegetables only nobles can afford to waste in a single meal. You stir it absently, absorbing the warm scent while trying to ignore the way the excess sits around you like a second cloak. You take another bite, knowing the servants are watching, the household is listening, and breakfast is not just food, it is ceremony, hierarchy, expectation, and indulgence all wrapped together on a wooden table. And the unsettling part is how easily you swallow it. You step out into the courtyard with your cloak settling around your shoulders, the fabric billowing just enough to make it look intentional. The morning air carries the smell of damp earth and wood smoke, and beneath it all lies the softer scent of manure from distant fields, carefully kept far enough away that nobles can pretend farming is a mystical process performed by invisible spirits instead of exhausted human beings. The sun has barely climbed above the tree line, but the estate is already awake in that quiet, industrious way that happens when everyone except you has been working for hours. A stable boy darts past, leading a horse that looks far more aware of its responsibilities than you are. He bows quickly, then continues on, muttering to the animal as though the two of them share secrets about the absurdity of noble life. You watch him go, struck by how effortlessly he moves, how sure he is of his purpose. You walk because walking is expected of you. He walks because work waits for him whether he likes it or not. You make your way toward the fields, escorted by two attendants who pretend you might need assistance navigating a flat path. The estate stretches outward in rolling waves of pasture and farmland, dotted with cottages so small they make your manor look like a sleeping giant. Smoke curls lazily from their chimneys. People move in and out of doorways with baskets, tools, bundles of cloth, all following a rhythm older than your lineage. You realize how little of this rhythm you understand, even though it exists entirely for your benefit. A group of women turn the soil near the orchard, their hands quick and practiced, their laughter drifting across the field with surprising warmth. When they notice you, the laughter stops, replaced by hurried bows and lowered eyes. You want to tell them to continue, to behave naturally, but nothing you say will undo the centuries that taught them nobles are always watching and always judging. You offer a polite nod, and they return to their work with renewed vigor, probably hoping you did not notice the moment of joy they allowed themselves earlier. You move on, stepping over a stone that juts proudly from the ground like it is trying to trip someone important. The orchard stretches before you, branches heavy with fruit that will appear on your table later, arranged artistically beside imported delicacies that required entire caravans to transport. A young man perches on a ladder, picking apples with the steady concentration of someone who knows one mistake could cost him more than bruised fruit. He plucks an apple, glances down, and almost topples when he realizes you are watching. You raise a hand to steady him instinctively, even though you are several paces away, and he manages to regain his balance with a murmur of thanks. It strikes you, not for the first time, that none of these people have the luxury of carelessness. Your missteps are laughed off at feasts. Theirs ripple through their lives like thrown stones. You head toward the mill next, its wooden wheel turning with lazy strength as water rushes beneath it. The miller stands at the doorway, dusted in flour from beard to boots. He bows stiffly before explaining the grain yields in a tone so respectful it borders on terrified. You nod, pretending to follow every detail, even though you lost the thread 3 sentences in. He does not need you to understand. He needs you to appear satisfied. That is the silent agreement between wealth and labor. As you leave, a pair of children race past chasing a chicken that is far more agile than either of them. Their mother calls after them, then freezes when she sees you. She drops a hurried curtsy while pulling the children close. You smile, genuinely, because their chaos feels refreshingly honest. But the woman's shoulders do not relax until you have walked well out of sight. Your estate is beautiful in the way painted tapestries are beautiful, full of charm as long as you do not look too closely at the threads. Everywhere you turn, someone bends, lifts, pulls, stirs, sweeps, sorts, or repairs something on your behalf. They disappear into doorways, into fields, into the shade of barns, all working to maintain a life you stroll through without thinking. By the time you circle back toward the manor, the sun is higher, and the estate moves with a steady hum of purpose. You pause at the top of the rise, looking over the land that bears your name, the land you rule and barely understand. You thought wealth would feel like a cushion beneath your feet, but walking your estate, you feel the truth more clearly. It is not a cushion. It is a structure held up by hands you rarely see. Hands that never stop moving, hands that never stop carrying your comfort. You step into the receiving room and instantly feel the air thicken, as though the walls themselves are bracing for the spectacle about to unfold. The chamber is bright with morning sun that pours through stained glass and lands on polished floors, making the entire place shine like it desperately wants to impress someone. Chairs are arranged in a semicircle that looks casual only if you completely ignore how carefully each one angles toward the others. Nobles do not sit. They position. They calibrate. They create an arrangement meant to look effortless while being anything but. You take your place, lowering yourself with the kind of controlled grace you practiced as a child, when tutors corrected your posture with the enthusiasm of people who believed slouching could trigger societal collapse. Across from you sits Lady Alicette, her smile so delicate it could snap if someone coughed too loudly. She inclines her head exactly the amount tradition dictates, not an inch more, not an inch less. You mirror the gesture, because this is the game. Everyone knows it, and everyone pretends they do not. A steward announces the arrival of Sir Rowan, whose footsteps echo down the hall in perfect rhythm, as if he hopes the sound alone will communicate his importance. He enters with the serene confidence of someone who has practiced this entrance in polished shields since youth. He bows, holding the position for what feels like several lifetimes before rising with a smile too wide to be genuine. You respond with an expression meant to suggest warm recognition while carefully avoiding anything resembling enthusiasm. Too much warmth implies you want something. Too little implies rivalry. The balance must be perfect. Servants circulate with small cups of wine, offering them with the silent precision of a religious ceremony. You accept one, feeling every eye in the room discreetly note the angle of your fingers around the cup, the way you raise it, the timing of your sip. Even drinking is a performance. Sip too soon and you seem overeager. Sip too late and you seem aloof. Sip at the wrong moment and someone will absolutely interpret it as a subtle sign of insult. You choose your moment carefully, touching the wine to your lips with the gravity of a knight swearing an oath. Lady Alicette remarks that the weather has been mild. Sir Rowan agrees, adding that the crops must surely benefit. You nod thoughtfully, as though this groundbreaking observation has opened new philosophical horizons. Every word floats between you on a cushion of politeness so thick it threatens to smother the conversation entirely. You are all pretending this exchange means something profound, when in truth it is a delicate fencing match where the weapons are smiles and the blades are compliments sharpened into warnings. The conversation drifts to recent festivities, and Lady Alicette compliments your musicians while somehow implying her own musicians possess a slightly more refined style. You respond with admiration for her dancers, which tactfully suggests their skill must be the result of her excellent leadership. Sir Rowan laughs a little too loudly. eager to avoid being left out of the exchange, and mentions his own household's remarkable tapestry collection. You praise the skill of his weavers, while simultaneously hinting that imported textiles have unmatched value. His smile flickers, and you immediately soften yours to keep the peace. This is what noble etiquette truly is, a dance of gestures, gazes, and comments layered with meaning, like a cake baked by someone who fears direct communication. You watch every lift of a brow, every tilt of a head, deciphering subtleties while offering your own carefully crafted signals. Your back aches from sitting too straight. Your cheeks hurt from polite smiling. Your brain works harder deciphering these conversations than it ever did studying history or theology. A servant drops a spoon in the corner of the room, and the entire chamber goes still for half a second. The noise itself is trivial, but everyone silently assesses whether the servant's error should be acknowledged, punished, or ignored. You choose to ignore it first, which prompts the others to do the same. The servant exhales, saved not by mercy, but by etiquette's insistence on maintaining the illusion that nothing unscripted ever happens. As the gathering winds down, you rise at the precise moment that signals closure without appearing abrupt. Lady Alicette stands as well, thanking you with a level of gratitude that suggests she has survived a minor ordeal. Sir Rowan bows again, his posture slightly stiffer than before, perhaps uncertain who gained the most ground in the unspoken skirmishes of the morning. When they finally leave, the room feels lighter, as though it has been holding its breath. You release your own tension slowly, rolling your shoulders once the last noble disappears through the doorway. You are wealthy. You are powerful. You are respected. But nothing in the world is more exhausting than pretending conversations about weather and carpets are a battlefield. You ride out with the hunting party just after the sun reaches its calm, golden place in the sky. The hour nobles have collectively decided is perfect for pretending they enjoy the outdoors. The forest looms ahead, vast and ancient, its branches twisting like old fingers pointing towards secrets you have no time to contemplate. The horses snort, restless, as if they also know this expedition has very little to do with meat and everything to do with performance. The hounds bay in shrill excitement, pulling at their leashes, eager to run toward whatever moving target will prove someone's courage today. Nobles do not come to admire birdsong. They come to be admired while pretending not to crave it. Sir Rowan rides beside you, posture straight, hair dramatically tousled by the wind in a way that absolutely looks intentional. He laughs too loudly at something a young knight says, all while casually checking to see whether you are watching. Lady Alicette trails you on a chestnut mare, looking delicate and serene, yet every so often she nudges her horse forward with a competitive spark that suggests she is prepared to trample someone if it means being first to spot the quarry. This hunt is supposed to be leisurely, but leisure is the one thing nobody here is capable of. The moment you cross beneath the canopy, the forest air cools, carrying the scent of pine, damp leaves, and the faint musk of animals who clearly had no say in becoming props for noble valor. Birds scatter as the hounds are released, surging ahead in a chaotic tide of fur and determination. You follow the group deeper into the woods, branches shivering above you, sunlight cutting in sharp beams that paint your path in flashes of light and shadow. Somewhere ahead, a stag moves silently, unaware that half the local aristocracy has devoted the day to demonstrating questionable heroics in pursuit of it. Your horse steps over roots and loose earth, and you pretend not to feel every wobble in your spine. A noble must look composed at all times, even when nature is doing its best to betray you. Sir Rowan rides just slightly ahead, glancing back every few minutes with a grin that says he hopes you noticed his bold positioning, yet also hopes you do not interpret it as challenge. You offer him a polite, non-committal look, because that is the only safe expression in this ongoing social negotiation. The hound's barking grows louder, echoing through the trees as the party picks up speed. Lady Alicette surges forward suddenly, her mare sweeping past you with unexpected force, her face arranged in an expression of mild apology that does not match the competitive flare in her eyes. You tighten your grip and urge your horse onward, not because you particularly want to chase an animal through questionable terrain, but because being outperformed is not an option any noble once whispered over supper. Branches whip past your face, your cloak snaps like a banner behind you, and the forest blurs into streaks of green and gold. Your heart pounds, less from excitement and more from the knowledge that everyone around you will judge your entire character over how confidently you ride in this absurd display. The forest floor dips sharply, and your horse leaps, and you manage to land with something resembling grace. A servant hidden among the riders lets out a breath of relief, clearly terrified he would be blamed for any mishap. You finally glimpse the stag ahead, antlers catching the sun, eyes bright with the realization that it is being pursued by people who mistake chaos for bravery. The nobles break into a practiced formation that is meant to look effortless and strategic, but mostly resembles wealthy people screaming instructions no one follows. Sir Rowan raises his spear. Lady Alicette lifts her bow. Several lesser nobles jostle for position, each pretending not to. You draw closer, but something in the stag's wild grace presses into you, a reminder that this creature is not part of the ritual. It is simply surviving. The nobles, however, are not here to survive. They are here to be seen surviving. The moment stretches thin as the stag bounds across a stream and disappears into deeper brush, leaving the entire party gasping in frustration or relief depending on their personal priorities. Sir Rowan lowers his spear with dramatic sorrow. Lady Alicette claims the animal was unusually swift. Someone blames the hounds. Someone else blames the wind. A servant quietly blames the nobles, but only in his head. The hunt dissolves into scattered conversation and nervous laughter, the tension easing now that no one has to prove anything deadly today. As you circle back toward the manor, sunlight warm on your shoulders and the forest humming behind you, you realize the truth of the midday hunt. No one remembers the animals caught. They remember who rode bravely, who faltered, who looked the part, and who did not. Bravery here is not about facing danger. It is about making danger look flattering. The afternoon sunlight slants through your manor windows in warm, lazy beams, but nothing about the atmosphere feels lazy. Servants race past with tapestries, cushions, platters, goblets, rugs, anything that might convince your arriving guests that you live in a state of effortless refinement rather than curated panic. Hosting nobles is not simply a duty. It is a performance staged with the precision of a play and the emotional strain of a silent duel. You straighten your tunic, breathe deeply, and hope you look like someone who woke up prepared for diplomacy rather than someone who has been practicing polite smiles in the mirror all morning. The first carriage rolls into the courtyard with a clatter of hooves and polished wheels. Lord Roulant descends, puffed up with the confidence of a man who has never once doubted his own opinions. Lady Muriel follows, every step graceful, every glance calculated in a way that makes you wonder whether she even blinks without purpose. Greetings begin with warm words and carefully moderated laughter, but under each syllable lurks the same quiet question. What can you offer them? And what do they want to take? You lead them to the great hall, where wine flows in ruby ribbons and servants glide past like trained shadows. The nobles settle into cushioned seats with the subtle relief of people who intended to judge your hospitality but have already decided they approve. Conversations bloom quickly, polite and convivial on the surface. Lord Roulant compliments the size of your hearth, which you know is noble code for you must be doing well this season. Lady Muriel touches the embroidery on a nearby tapestry, praising its craftsmanship while quietly evaluating how much you paid for it and whom you now owe. You answer their remarks with a practiced charm, even as your mind works to decode the layers in their words. You ask about their estates. They respond with stories that sound innocent yet reveal which alliances they favor, which neighbors they dislike, and which trade routes they plan to influence. Every comment is a stone placed deliberately on a board you are expected to read without looking down. The meal arrives, and the table fills with roasted meats, fish glazed in honey, vegetables arranged in patterns so symmetrical It almost feels insulting to eat them. Your guests compliment the feast, but their eyes flicker between one another with a competitive sharpness. You have fed them well, which means you must be prosperous, which means you might be worth impressing or undermining, depending on what they need from you. As you pour wine, Lord Roulant leans closer, voice low, tone conspiratorial. He praises your judgment on a recent dispute, but the praise is merely the wrapping paper. Inside it lies the real request. He seeks your support in a brewing conflict that he makes sound trivial, almost harmless, though you can feel the weight of it like stones in your stomach. You respond carefully, neither committing nor refusing, because a firm answer is a blade, a vague one is a shield. Lady Muriel shifts the topic toward trade, your harvest, the state of your mills. Her voice is soft, smooth, pleasant, but her questions are not idle. She is mapping out your strengths and weaknesses, deciding whether you stand as ally or obstacle. You maintain calm, offering just enough truth to appear open while keeping the important details quietly tucked away behind your ribs. The conversation drifts to marriage alliances, a subject nobles treat like a game of chess played with people instead of pieces. Lord Roulant mentions his niece, radiant and accomplished of course, and makes sure to highlight her dowry in a casual manner that is not casual at all. Lady Muriel counters with the news of a cousin recently come of age, whose beauty, she insists, could inspire poetry. You smile, nod, and pretend not to hear the rustle of invisible nets being cast around your future. As the evening deepens, music fills the hall and laughter rises, but beneath the pleasant noise lies a steady hum of ambition. You watch your guests like a falcon watching mice, each movement revealing something new, each smile a weapon polished to a shine. You laugh at their jokes, flatter their insights, and offer hospitality as generously as you dare. Yet your awareness never softens, for nobles do not visit simply to enjoy themselves. They visit to calculate. When the final goblet is set down and your guests retire to their chambers, the hall falls into silence. You exhale slowly, feeling the tension slide from your shoulders like a cloak dropping to the floor. It becomes clear that wealth in this world is not merely comfort, it is constant vigilance. The art of hearing meaning beneath words and sensing battles in friendly smiles. You hosted well, but the real conversations happen between the lines. You descend into the cool stone corridors beneath your manor, torchlight flickering across walls that smell faintly of wax, dust, and the metallic whisper of old coins. The treasury door looms ahead, heavy enough that it seems designed to intimidate anyone bold enough to ask why you keep so much wealth locked away from daylight. You lift the latch and step inside, half expecting the air itself to grow smug. Instead, it greets you with a hush so complete you feel like you have intruded on a sleeping creature. Rows of chests line the room, their iron bands glinting in the amber light. Some are filled with coins, stamped with the faces of kings who died before you were born. Others hold jewels that catch the torch glow and splinter it into colors vivid enough to seem unreal. You open one at random, and a cascade of silver spills across your palms, cool and strangely lifeless, as though metal refuses to warm to human touch. It should feel thrilling, the way a child feels when handed something too special to be trusted with. Instead, it presses into your hands like a reminder that you carry responsibility shaped into glitter. You move deeper into the room. Fabrics imported from far cities lie folded in fragrant stacks, perfumed by spices no one in your village could name. Golden goblets rest on silk cushions, their rims engraved with vines and beasts that snarl silently. Each object is beautiful, yes, but also loud in its own way, a chorus of expectations. Wealth means power. Power means attention. Attention means danger. It is an arithmetic you never asked to learn. A servant hovers at the doorway, pretending to dust the hinges while stealing glances at you. You know the look well, awe mixed with curiosity, shaded by fear, because people speak of riches as if they are magic, as if owning gold makes you less mortal. Yet the truth sits heavy inside your chest, more solid than any coin in the room. Wealth is not armor, it is a beacon. It draws eyes the way fire draws moths, and some of those eyes are hungry. You run your fingertips over a necklace of deep red gems that once belonged to an aunt whose life ended in a quarrel over inheritance. The jewels gleam with a beauty that feels almost mocking, as if they know they will outlive every human who touches them. Objects like these never share the burdens they create. They simply sit and shine, letting humans ruin themselves over the privilege of holding them. You open another chest and reveal bolts of cloth dyed with rare pigments, blues richer than twilight, greens so deep they seem pulled from forest shadows. You imagine the fields where the plants were grown, the laborers who harvested them, the merchants who sailed across uncertain waters to bring them here. You imagine all the hands these luxuries pass through, each hand a life with its own aches and risks, before arriving in your possession to rest quietly, serving no purpose but prestige. You step back, surveying the room. Every object seems to stare back at you with polished calm. The coins hold no warmth, the jewels offer no comfort, the fabrics whisper nothing of the world that made them. They wait for you to assign them meaning. They wait for you to bear the weight of what they represent. A strange thought curls through you. Wealth is not simply a blessing. It is a ledger written in invisible ink, tracking every resource you control, every worker who relies on you, every rival who envies you, every alliance made fragile by the knowledge that you have more than others. Your fortune is a quiet, glittering beast you must continually feed and guard. The treasury should feel like triumph. Instead, it feels like confession. You close the final chest and let the silence settle around you once more. The room's riches gleam softly, indifferent to your existence, indifferent to the world beyond the stone walls. You turn toward the exit, torch trailing warm light behind you. As the heavy door thuds shut, you realize wealth never stays in the treasury. It follows you, step by step, like a shadow made of gold. You ride down the winding path toward the village with 2 attendants trailing behind, mostly for show, and partly because nobles are expected to travel with an entourage, even if you are only planning to ask about grain yields. The air shifts as you move farther from your manor, trading polished stone corridors for open fields where the earth smells honest, damp, and faintly hopeful. Birds chatter overhead as if unaware of the invisible lines society has drawn between you and the people who live here. Your horse's hooves kick up dust, and you feel each step bring a subtle loosening inside your chest, as though breathing becomes easier the farther you get from the expectations of nobility. The village appears slowly, a cluster of thatched roofs nestled against the slope of a hill. Smoke curls from chimneys in thin ribbons, carrying the scent of stew, straw, and a hint of something vaguely burnt that villagers consider normal. Children chase one another near the well, their laughter bright and unguarded. Women scrub laundry against wooden boards. Men repair fences and carry bundles of firewood. Everyone is busy. Everyone is tired. And none of them pause to philosophize about the meaning of privilege the way nobles over wine inevitably do. When you dismount, the villagers stiffen just enough to remind you that your presence is not casual. A noble walking into a village is never casual. It is an event, a spectacle, and occasionally a warning. You give a polite greeting, trying to sound approachable without sounding like someone pretending to be approachable. Several villagers bow, a few curtsy, and one man nods in a way that almost approaches comfort before his wife elbows him into propriety. Their eyes flick briefly to your clothing, your boots, your attendants, the rings on your fingers. They do not stare long, but you feel every glance like a small stone thrown against your armor. You have always known you are different from them, yet standing here, ankle deep in mud, and surrounded by lives shaped by necessity, the difference feels unnervingly sharp. A young woman with a shy smile guides you toward the mill, explaining the status of the wheat crop. Her voice is steady, but her hands are restless, twisting the fabric of her apron. You listen, nodding at the right moments, but the whole time a quiet unease grows. Here, problems are immediate. A bad harvest is not an inconvenience. It is a threat. A broken barn roof is not a chore. It is a crisis. These people live inside the consequences of every season, while you live above them, cushioned by coin, connections, and servants who solve issues before you even hear of them. The miller greets you with a bow that looks like it pains his back, and he explains the machinery's condition, the river's behavior, the repairs needed. You feel the weight of responsibility settle heavily on you, almost physical. Your wealth and authority do not float above this place. They press upon it. Every choice you make ripples outward, shaping lives that will never fully speak to you without caution. A group of children gather near your horse, whispering about the sheen of its coat. One boy reaches out before thinking better of it, pulling his hand back as though the horse might bite or you might scold. You crouch and offer him a smile, saying he may pet the animal gently. His face lights up as though you have given him something priceless, and it twists something in your chest that you cannot quite name. You continue through the village, offering greetings, answering questions, giving reassurance you hope is truthful. People speak to you with gratitude, with respect, with hope they try to hide but cannot. And all the while, you feel the invisible chasm stretching between your world and theirs. You are surrounded by human warmth, yet kept at arm's length by the very status that grants you the ability to help them. As you mount your horse to leave, the villagers gather once more, offering farewells and wishes for your health. You thank them, though the words feel small compared to everything unsaid. You ride back toward the manor, fields swaying in the breeze, sunlight deepening into late afternoon gold. Only when the rooftops of your estate come into view do you realize the truth that has been quietly forming all day. You can walk among the villagers, speak with them, even care for them, but you cannot quite belong with them, and you are not entirely sure if belonging with the nobles feels any closer. You find the steward in his usual place, the small solar room off the great hall, where beams of late morning light fall across parchment in a way that makes everything look slightly more dramatic than necessary. He rises when you enter, offering a bow that feels respectful but not deferential. Stewards have a particular confidence, the kind that comes from knowing exactly how many coins stand between a noble and disaster. His gray hair is pulled neatly back, and his eyes hold the steady calm of someone who has spent a lifetime watching families like yours live far beyond what their ledgers recommend. You take a seat across from him, and he spreads out scrolls with practiced efficiency. Ink pots thud softly against the table. Quills are laid out with soldier-like precision, and soon you are surrounded by numbers, maps, receipts, promises, and the unmistakable smell of wax and responsibility. He begins with the rents collected, the yields expected, the tithes owed, the repairs needed, and the quiet truth that there is always more owed than expected, always more needed than collected. His tone remains polite, even warm at times, but beneath the surface lies the faintest thread of warning. You nod along, attempting to look knowledgeable, though half the figures sound like riddles spoken by a man with too much patience. He slides a parchment toward you, showing the tally of your estate's income, and for a moment you feel a flicker of pride. Then he slides the next parchment, showing your expenses, and the pride dissolves like soap in boiling water. Repairs to the eastern barn, payments to the miller's apprentices, the cost of imported fabrics you forgot you ordered, the wages owed to soldiers, cooks, stable hands, and the small army of people who ensure your life appears seamless. More lines follow, each one a reminder that wealth is not a lake you swim in, but a river you must constantly redirect before it spills over its banks. The steward watches you read, his gaze steady but kind, as though he is trying to soften the edges of truths he knows you cannot ignore. He clears his throat and mentions the upcoming festival your house is expected to host, the gifts you will be expected to give, the feast that must rival those of your peers lest there be talk, and of course, the cost of talk is always higher than the cost of a feast. You feel your chest tighten as he details the expected expenses, and suddenly your treasury does not feel like a trove, but a sieve. He gestures toward a smaller parchment, the kind used for delicate matters. your debts from previous seasons, names of merchants who smile warmly in person but take meticulous notes when you delay payment, names of nobles who lent money under the guise of friendship, though everyone knows friendship has interest rates. The steward's voice softens here, as though gentleness might keep the numbers from shifting into something ominous. You lean back in your chair, feeling the wood press into your spine, and you realize that power, at least the kind tied to coin, is not a throne. It is a balancing act, performed on thin beams above a crowd waiting for entertainment. A single mistake, a single miscalculation, and everything shifts. The steward does not need to say this aloud. His calm, measured explanations already convey it. He moves on to your upcoming obligations, political and personal. You must send gifts to a neighboring lord whose goodwill you require. You must contribute to church repairs, because no noble wants a priest publicly mentioning their stinginess during Mass. There is the matter of paying for additional guards, since bandit sightings have increased. And of course, there are winter stores to purchase, because a noble who allows hunger on their lands earns a reputation that clings like soot. When he finishes, the steward folds his hands and looks at you, not as a servant looks at a master, but as one human looks at another, standing near the edge of something steep. He tells you, with quiet firmness, that riches impress the world, but stability maintains it. He reminds you that wealth is a tide that rises and falls, and it will drown anyone too distracted to swim. You sit in the silence that follows, surrounded by documents that feel heavier than stone. Outside, the manor bustles, servants rushing, nobles gossiping, the world spinning in its familiar orbit, unaware of the fragile math holding it together. The steward bows once more and gathers the scrolls, leaving you with a lingering truth. Power is not measured by how much gold you possess. It is measured by how quickly that gold can vanish. Steam curls upward in soft spirals as you step into the bathing chamber, a room warmed to a gentle haze by 3 servants who have spent the last hour coaxing heat into water as if performing a sacred rite. The tub itself sits in the center like a jewel, carved from smooth stone and polished until it gleams in the candlelight. Bowls of herbs and spices line the edge, their aromas drifting through the air in warm, luxurious waves. Cinnamon, lavender, rosemary, and something foreign you cannot identify but pretend you can. Nobles are expected to recognize scents the way scholars recognize scripture. Your attendants dip their heads as you approach, each one guided by the unspoken rule that bathing you is somehow a noble task rather than an awkward one. They help you slip out of your garments with practiced discretion, folding each layer into neat, reverent bundles. You lower yourself into the water, which greets your skin like molten comfort, rich with oils that shimmer faintly on the surface. Heat settles into your muscles, dissolving tension you did not even know you carried until now. The servants stand nearby with towels draped over their arms, pretending not to listen, not to look, not to breathe too loudly. You sink deeper, letting the water close around you, and for a moment the noble world with its whispers and duties fades beyond the door. The scent of cloves drifts over the bath, warm enough to feel decadent, and you imagine spice caravans traveling impossible distances just so your water can smell like abundance. One servant kneels to pour another ladle of steaming water into the tub, careful not to let a single drop splash onto your face. You thank him out of habit, and he startles slightly, as though the kind of gratitude that comes from nobles requires decoding. They resume their quiet tasks, adjusting herbs, refreshing cloths, adding heat with an almost ceremonial rhythm. Being rich, you realize, often means your simplest comforts demand the labor of several people who woke far earlier than you did. You tilt your head back, letting your hair drift weightlessly through the water, and feel a rare calm settle over you. The room glows with amber candlelight, flickering across the walls and turning every stone surface into something soft and inviting. You can almost pretend this is normal, this indulgence of warmth and scent and total stillness. But there is always a moment, always, when you recognize the strangeness of it. So much effort poured into a single bath, so much heat gathered by men who will never stand in water this clean or smell spices this costly. Yet the calm persists, seeping into you like warmth into cold hands. You stretch your legs beneath the surface, feeling the gliding weight of water wrap around your calves. It is indulgent, yes, but it is also one of the few moments in your day when no mask is required, no posture to maintain, no conversations disguised as negotiations. Here, there is only water, flickering light, and the quiet awareness that the world beyond the door cannot reach you for a little while. Another servant steps forward with a cloth soaked in fragrant oils. He offers it to you for your hands, your neck, your face, each movement slow and precise. The scent blooms around you, warm enough to feel like comfort, strong enough to feel like wealth. You press the cloth to your skin and inhale, letting the spices mingle with steam until your thoughts blur and soften. For a moment, everything is slow, gentle, almost human. But eventually, the heat begins to fade, and the water cools. The servants exchange glances, wondering whether they should prepare another kettle, but you lift your hand in a small gesture. It is enough. They move forward with towels, soft, thick, woven from fabrics no villager would ever touch, and help you rise from the water as if lifting something delicate and sacred. You step out of the tub, cocooned in warmth, droplets sliding down your skin like tiny mirrors catching candlelight. The servants wrap you in fresh linens and lead you toward a chair where they tend to your hair, your clothes, your composure. You allow it all, sinking into the ritual as though it is as essential as breathing. Beneath it all lies a quiet truth. Luxury does not simply touch your life. It seeps into every corner, warm as bathwater, fragrant as spice, and impossible to ignore. The church bell calls you long before you reach the village, its solemn toll drifting over the fields like a reminder that some forces in this world do not bend, even for nobility. You arrive with your attendants trailing behind you, the morning crisp and quiet. The stone church rises from the earth like a stubborn relic, its walls worn smooth by wind and prayer. Villagers gather outside, adjusting cloaks, wiping mud from boots, guiding restless children toward the doorway. They part as you approach, offering bows and murmured blessings, their eyes flicking quickly from your face to your garments, then away again, as if uncertain how long they are allowed to look at you. Inside, incense clings to the air in thick, fragrant clouds. Candles flicker along the nave, casting warm pools of light onto polished wood and aging murals. The priest waits at the altar, hands folded, posture straightened to convey both humility and authority. You take your seat in the noble pew, cushioned, elevated slightly above the rest, a detail meant to honor your status yet only succeeds in making you feel more conspicuous. Faith, you realize as you settle, is easier when no one is watching you practice it. Villagers shuffle into their places. Children whisper. A woman hushes her son. A man removes his cap with a hurried reverence. The murmurs fade as the priest lifts his hands and begins the service, his voice echoing through the chamber with practiced steadiness. He speaks of humility, of charity, of service to God and one another, words that float around you in warm waves. Yet underneath the familiar rhythm lies something taught, a tension you have learned to recognize in the way religious authority glances at earthly power. The priest mentions the generosity of local nobles, thanking you by name with a smile that seems both sincere and strategic. The congregation turns subtly toward you, as though expecting you to glow with holy virtue, and you respond with a polite nod. You know this gratitude is not only for donations already given, it is also a gentle reminder of the donations expected, the subtle nudge that every noble has heard and pretended not to hear since time began. The reading continues, and you try to focus on the words, but your mind wanders. Between the lines of scripture, you hear the unsaid concerns. The church roof needs repair, winter is coming, and the poor will need alms. The priest speaks of unity, but his eyes shift toward you at moments that feel too precisely placed to be coincidence. You are a symbol of stability here, a patron whose generosity or stinginess will be repeated in whispers by the fire for weeks. When the priest turns to speak of sin, his tone grows firmer, not condemning, not harsh, but weighted in that way clergy adopt when addressing an entire room while still aiming half their message at you. Wealth can obscure the path to virtue. Nobles must resist pride. Power must serve righteousness. His gaze drifts toward your pew again, just long enough to draw a few curious glances from the congregation. You sit straighter, wondering whether this is gentle correction or political posturing. In the medieval world, faith and power are lifelong neighbors who never quite trust one another. The offering basket passes through the crowd. When it reaches you, the villagers watch discreetly, their heads bowed too quickly to be natural. You place a generous amount inside, partly out of duty, partly out of genuine goodwill, and partly because anything less would ignite rumors by evening. The priest nods, serene and satisfied, and the basket moves on. You hear someone behind you whisper a blessing, soft and grateful. As the service nears its end, the priest shifts once more, speaking now of earthly struggles and divine guidance. It is an art, this weaving of spiritual comfort with political caution, a reminder that nobles must lead with righteousness, a warning that divine judgment applies even to the wealthy, a reassurance to the common people that the church stands beside them, even when nobles do not. The balance is delicate, like holding a candle in a strong wind. When the final prayer concludes, the villagers stream outside in a ripple of chatter and relieved movement. The priest approaches you with a smile that carries warmth, but also careful calculation. He speaks of faith, of community, of mutual duty. You respond politely, grateful for his guidance, mindful of the invisible negotiation unfolding between you. He needs your support. You need his approval. Both of you know this. Neither will say it aloud. Outside, the sun is brighter. The villagers gather around you, offering greetings, asking for blessings, thanking you for your presence. You give each one attention, though your thoughts drift back to the church's dim interior, where candles burned with quiet insistence and two forms of power sat close enough to breathe the same incense. You mount your horse, feeling the weight of duty settle differently on your shoulders. Faith comforts you, politics complicate you, and Mass, you realize, will always be where the two meet. You step into the training yard just as the sun climbs to its strongest point, its heat turning the packed dirt into a warm, dust-scented haze. The clang of metal rings through the air in sharp bursts, each strike echoing off the stone walls like a reminder that peace is never quiet for long in your world. Knights move across the yard in coordinated bursts of motion, armor flashing, blades slicing the air with the confidence of men who have spent their lives learning how to end someone else's. You pause at the entrance, watching them with a strange mix of admiration and unease. Your presence does not go unnoticed. A few knights straighten instinctively, adjusting their posture to something more impressive, while squires scramble to clear clutter or pretend they were not resting moments earlier. Sweat darkens tunics, splatters the dirt, and rolls down faces that try desperately to maintain dignity despite the heat. You nod in acknowledgement, pretending not to notice the small flurry of activity your arrival has sparked. Nobles rarely train, they observe, and observation alone seems to unsettle everyone here. You walk toward the center of the yard, where two knights clash in a display meant to look effortless, but clearly demands every ounce of strength they possess. Shields slam against one another with dull, bone-jarring thuds. Their blades whistle through the air before colliding in sparks that scatter like tiny stars. Each movement carries weight, purpose, and the steady hum of danger tightly leashed. This is not performance for your benefit, though the men hope you notice. This is the routine that keeps your manor standing, your halls quiet, your wealth unchallenged. A squire approaches you, breathless, offering a cup of watered wine as if he believes witnessing violence must be exhausting. You take it, sip, and watch as the knights reset their stances. They circle each other with a predator's focus, eyes sharp, mouths set. The tension between them feels almost alive, stretching out like a bowstring pulled too far. When they charge again, the impact shudders through the ground beneath your boots. You realize then in a way you rarely let yourself acknowledge, that all your comforts depend on this, on strength sharpened daily, on threats answered quickly, on violence waiting quietly in your service, your silks, your feasts, your shimmering baths. None would exist if not for the steel that stands between you and the chaos beyond your lands. It is a truth nobles prefer, to dress in noble words like duty and honor. But beneath the lace of sentiment, there is always the blade. A knight breaks away from his opponent long enough to greet you. His face is streaked with sweat and dust, yet he smiles with the confidence of someone who has never questioned his role. He speaks of drills, patrols, bandit sightings, the usual concerns delivered in a tone that suggests he is reporting the weather. You listen, nodding, though each word weighs more heavily than you expect. These men protect your borders. They risk their bodies while you risk, at most, political embarrassment or a poorly timed feast. He returns to sparring, and soon the yard fills again with the crashing rhythm of training. Some knights practice mounted maneuvers, guiding their horses through tight turns and sudden halts. Others drill with spears, their wooden shafts thumping against targets with unsettling force. Farther off, a group of squires run drills until their legs tremble, each one desperate to prove they belong among the armored elite. You wander along the perimeter, passing racks of weapons and shields scarred by countless impacts. Each dent tells a story you will never hear. Each chipped blade is a reminder that the world outside your walls is always testing its boundaries. You brush your fingers along the edge of a shield and feel the cold ridges worn into its surface. Luxury may be soft, warm, fragrant, but its foundation is anything but. As you watch the knights continue their relentless choreography, a realization settles over you, quiet but persistent. Your life is built on layers of labor, strategy, and strength, yet nothing is as fundamental as this. Wealth can buy cloth, jewels, and towering halls, but it cannot exist without someone willing to hold a sword for it. A final clash rings out across the yard, the sound sharp enough to startle birds from a nearby tree. The knights lower their weapons, panting, nodding to one another with the respect forged only in shared struggle. They notice you again, and each offers a gesture of acknowledgement before returning to their routines. You turn back toward the manor, the sound of steel fading behind you but not leaving your thoughts. The truth follows you like a loyal, unsettling shadow. Your luxury is not guarded by walls, nor by wealth. It is guarded by men who train every day to ensure violence serves your comfort and not the other way around. You enter the great hall dressed in fabrics that shimmer under torchlight, and the moment you arrive, the noise dips just enough to remind you that every noble here has been trained since childhood to scan for entrances like predators scenting the wind. Long tables stretch beneath banners embroidered with the kind of intricate knots only wealthy families can afford to insist are symbolic. Servants weave between the benches, carrying trays so heavy they tilt slightly, though none dare spill even a drop. The smell of roasted meats, spiced vegetables, fresh bread, and too many perfumes layered together hits you at once, luxurious and overwhelming. You take your seat at the high table just as the first platters arrive. A roasted peacock glitters beneath a glaze so shiny it reflects the candle flames like a polished shield. A boar's head is posed mid-snarl, apples wedged between its teeth as if trying to grimace politely. Bowls of figs, cherries, almonds, and cheeses line the table, each arranged in patterns that require someone with too much time and too little supervision. The abundance is ridiculous, but nobles pretend it is reasonable, even modest. That is the unspoken rule of the banquet. Excess is expected, but acknowledgement of excess is forbidden. You try to focus on your meal, but conversation surges around you in a spirited tide. Lady Alicette remarks loudly on the beauty of your tapestries, her tone carrying the faint sweetness of someone who wants you to notice how gracefully she compliments things. Lord Rouland interrupts to praise the seasoning of the venison, which conveniently allows him to mention that his own cook prepared something similar last week. That is how noble compliments work. They begin as admiration and end as competitive declarations dressed in silk. Across the table, Two merchants argue in polite half-sentences about trade routes, each insisting they hold the advantage without ever saying it outright. A cluster of minor nobles nearby whispers about who is courting whom, whose estate is struggling, whose son allegedly ran away with a traveling musician before mysteriously returning with no memory of why he left. These stories glide across the hall faster than the servants can refill goblets. Gossip here is not merely entertainment. It is sport, currency, and weaponry all braided together. A servant tops off your wine before you notice your goblet is low. The ruby liquid swirls gently, catching light like something plotting to stain your dignity if you drink too quickly. You lift it carefully. Listening to the guests around you, pick apart the details of a cousin's scandal involving a lost dowry, a misbehaving hound, and a priest who absolutely did not want to get involved, but absolutely did. Every part of the story grows more dramatic with each retelling, as if nobles consider restraint an insult to narrative tradition. A platter of trout arrives next, its silver skin shining beneath herbal butter. Lady Muriel leans toward you to mention, with perfect delicacy, that she has heard rumors about a neighboring lord seeking new alliances. Her tone is mild, but the message beneath it is sharp as a hidden blade. You respond with similar subtlety, offering a comment that is both neutral and gently pointed, because banquets are not about food, they are about balance. Every sentence is a test. Every reaction is measured. Further down the table, a bard begins to play, his lute drifting into a melody that makes conversation briefly soften. Yet even then, the whispers continue, quieter but more concentrated, as though music simply provides better cover for the most delicate rumors. You catch fragments about taxes, failed harvests, marriages arranged and broken, and one scandal so elaborate it involves 3 nobles, 2 falcons, and a missing shipment of saffron. By the time dessert arrives, the entire hall is humming with a kind of social electricity. Golden pastries stuffed with honey and spices appear, and the sweetness cuts through the thick air of tension and theatrics. You take a bite and let the sugary warmth melt over your tongue, savoring the one part of the evening that asks nothing of you but simple pleasure. Yet even then, you feel eyes drifting your way, assessing how you eat, how much you eat, what your expression reveals. As the final course is cleared and the music swells, you feel the familiar truth settle around you again. Banquets are celebrations, yes, but not of food. They celebrate hierarchy, alliances, rivalries, appearances. Gossip flows faster than wine because it is easier to swallow, easier to share, and far more intoxicating. You rise from the table with the hall still buzzing behind you. Your stomach is full, your goblet empty, and your mind swirling with more whispered stories than any person should reasonably carry. Luxury fills the plates, but it is gossip that feeds the room. You notice it before anyone speaks about it, the subtle shift in the room's rhythm, the kind of hush that rolls through a crowd when something unscripted dares to happen. You are walking through the gallery after the banquet, the air still warm with the smell of wax and sweet pastries, when a cluster of nobles stiffens like hounds catching an unfamiliar scent. Their eyes all tilt in the same direction, toward an alcove partially hidden behind a tapestry depicting saints who are suddenly being forced to witness something decidedly unholy. You approach with polite curiosity, which in noble terms means you pretend not to be curious at all. Then you see them, Sir Rowan and Lady Muriel, standing far too close together, whispering in the kind of proximity reserved for confession or catastrophe. His hand brushes her arm. Her smile flickers with the guilty brightness of someone who knows she should step back but chooses not to. The moment hangs in the air, like a candle threatening to drip onto expensive cloth. A lesser noble gasps softly. Another raises an eyebrow so high it nearly becomes its own social class. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else mutters something decidedly not a prayer. And you watch the scandal bloom in real time, its petals opening with swift, ruthless elegance. Sir Rowan is married. Lady Muriel is very much not his wife, or anyone's wife. Not yet, but half the nobles present know her family has been negotiating a marriage alliance. The wrong witnesses, the wrong whispers, and her future shifts shape like heated metal. The two sinners, if that is the word nobles will use later, finally notice the eyes on them. They separate like startled birds, attempting to rearrange themselves into innocence. Sir Rowan clears his throat with the exaggerated gravitas of a man trying to pretend he was absolutely not leaning towards someone else's shoulder. Lady Muriel smooths her gown, cheeks flushed, the picture of someone caught in a moment she thought she controlled. You can almost hear the gossip sparking from person to person. It travels with incredible speed, faster than any messenger on horseback, faster even than rumors about taxes or failed hunts. A noblewoman near you turns with wide eyes and whispers to her companion, who then whispers to his, and soon the entire gallery hums with judgments, theories, and wild imaginings. No one says their names aloud yet. Nobles rarely begin a scandal with names. They begin with implications, subtle as a blade sliding from a hidden sheath. A servant enters carrying a tray of spiced wine and instantly freezes, sensing the tension like a dog sensing a coming storm. He backs away slowly, wisely deciding that stepping between nobles and gossip is an act only fools and martyrs attempt. Meanwhile, Sir Rowan tries to laugh off the moment, insisting he simply leaned in to comment on the artistry of the tapestry, which would be believable if the tapestry were not depicting the crucifixion. Lady Muriel claims she merely felt faint from the heat, which would also be believable if she were not glowing like a struck match. The crowd disperses slowly, but the whispers do not fade. They sharpen. Accusations grow teeth. Facts dissolve into possibilities. By the time you move toward the hall, the story has already been reshaped at least 3 times. Someone claims Sir Rowan confessed love. Someone else claims Lady Muriel initiated everything. A third insists she was trapped in his embrace, which is particularly impressive considering her posture earlier suggested anything but reluctance. You reflect, as nobles do when watching reputations wobble, how thin the line is between admiration and ruin. One misplaced glance, one poorly timed laugh, one moment of softness witnessed by the wrong pair of eyes, and a person's name becomes a kind of entertainment. Nobles like to pretend reputation is earned through honor, or lineage, or heroic deeds. But moments like this reveal the truth. Reputation is a fragile fruit balanced on a knife. One nudge sends it tumbling. As you leave the gallery, Sir Rowan stands rigid against a pillar, trying to appear unbothered, though his jaw is tight enough to crack almonds. Lady Muriel walks in the opposite direction, her head high, her steps steady, performing composure with the skill of a court-trained actress. But you can see the tremor beneath her calm, the hint of fear threaded through her resolve. By morning, you know the story will change again. By midday, it will be exaggerated beyond recognition. By evening, Lady Muriel's fate may depend on how convincingly she can rewrite what everyone believes they saw. You exit the hall with the murmur of scandal still echoing behind you, and you realize that in the world of nobles, nothing unravels faster than a reputation exposed to the slightest pull. You step into your private gardens just as the late afternoon sun dips low enough to paint everything in warm gold, turning the air itself into something soft and indulgent. The moment the gate closes behind you, the world shifts. The sounds of the manor fade, the murmurs of servants, the clatter of armor, the shuffling of parchment all dissolve into a hush broken only by birdsong and the delicate rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. It smells of roses, damp earth, crushed herbs, and that faint sweetness flowers release only when they know no one is watching. Your garden is a masterpiece stitched together by hands far more skilled than your own. Gravel paths wind like threads through beds of lilies and violets, and strange imported blooms with names you can never remember but pretend to. Fountains murmur nearby, water spilling over, carved stone in quiet patterns meant to soothe the mind and remind you of nature's gentler moods. Even the hedges stand taller and more obedient than hedges in the wild, shaped into neat arches and spirals that require the daily attention of gardeners who know enough not to speak loudly in a noble sanctuary. You inhale deeply, feeling the tension ease from your shoulders as you stroll past a cluster of flowering bushes so vibrant they look unreal. Beauty here is deliberate, curated. Nothing grows without intention. Every color complements another. Every scent is layered into the next. It is paradise, yes, but a constructed one, held together by coin, planning, and the quiet desperation of wanting something in your life to remain still, perfect, untouched. A gardener appears ahead of you, trimming blossoms with careful snips. He bows quickly before stepping aside, making himself small as if afraid his presence might disturb the serenity he works so hard to maintain. You smile politely, though he keeps his gaze respectfully lowered. You walk on, feeling the faint strangeness that always comes when you pass through a place built for your pleasure yet maintained by others' labor. The flowers bloom for you, but the work behind them belongs to someone else's hands. You pause by a marble bench beneath a canopy of wisteria, its purple blossoms spilling down like a curtain of silken threads. Sitting here always feels like stepping into another world, one free from negotiations, gossip, and the delicate balancing act of noble expectations. You let yourself sink into the seat, listening to the hum of bees drifting lazily between petals. The peace settles around you like a warm cloak, yet beneath it lurks a quieter feeling, something bittersweet, because you know this serenity is not natural. It is cultivated, purchased, protected by the very systems that weigh on you during the rest of the day. Still, the garden works its magic. You close your eyes and breathe in the scent of mint and blooming roses, imagining for a moment that you are simply a person sitting among flowers, not a figure whose every choice lives beyond these gates. But the spell breaks the moment you hear the distant call of a steward searching for you, his voice faint but persistent. Even here, responsibility reaches its tendrils in. You rise and continue along the path, trailing your fingers lightly along the tops of lavender stems. The sensation is soft, soothing, but it reminds you of how fragile this world is. One harsh winter, one failed harvest, one political misstep, and gardens like these could become a symbol of extravagance you can no longer afford. You try not to dwell on that thought, yet it follows you like a shadow hidden among the blossoms. You reach the far corner of the garden where a small stone pond shimmers under the fading light. Koi drift beneath the surface, their scales catching the sun in bright flashes of gold and white. You watch them glide slowly in circles, peaceful in a way only creatures with no awareness of politics can be. Their calm stirs something inside you, a longing for a kind of simplicity you were never allowed to know. But you are a noble, and nobles are not granted simplicity. You look once more at the flowers, the pond, the immaculate paths, and you finally understand why you come here whenever the world feels heavy. These gardens are not just beautiful, they are the proof you cling to, the reminder that even in a life shaped by pressure and scrutiny, something can still be gentle. You turn toward the gate as the sun slips lower, casting the last glow across your paradise. And as you step out, you feel the truth settle quietly within you. Peace can be grown, but it must be constantly tended, just like everything else you possess. The musicians gather in the great hall just after dusk, tuning their instruments with the solemn intensity of men preparing for battle. You take your seat near the hearth, the flames casting a warm glow over polished wood and embroidered tapestries, and you brace yourself for whatever interpretation of music they have decided upon tonight. The servants dim the candles just enough to make the moment feel artistic rather than foreboding. A hush falls across the room, and all at once every musician looks at you with the hopeful eyes of people who desperately want approval, but will absolutely not accept honesty. The first note arrives sharp enough to make the hound sleeping by the fire lift its head in confusion. A lute follows with a flourish so dramatic it throws the entire rhythm off balance. Yet the musician continues with the confidence of someone convinced he has just reinvented sound itself. You keep your expression calm, the faintest hint of a smile, because nobles do not wince. Nobles appreciate culture, even when culture feels like being lightly assaulted by enthusiastic strings. The pipes join in next, offering a melody that seems unsure whether it wishes to be mournful or festive, so it chooses a chaotic middle ground. The pipist glances toward you, eyes wide with expectation, as if begging for a reaction. You nod in what you hope passes for encouragement, though you suspect it comes across more like resignation. Still, he beams as though you have blessed him, and the pipes grow louder, bolder, increasingly convinced of their own genius. A harpist plucks a series of notes that fall like raindrops, delicate and genuinely lovely. And for a moment, you relax. Then the drummer begins. He strikes the drum with the enthusiasm of a man trying to summon ancient spirits, each thud echoing through the hall with the precision of a falling boulder. His rhythm fights the harp's gentleness until the music becomes a strange tug-of-war between serenity and alarm. You sip your wine slowly, the goblet hiding your mouth as you attempt to maintain a neutral expression. Around you, the nobles pretend they understand the composition. Lady Alicette tilts her head thoughtfully, as though analyzing hidden symbolism known only to those with refined souls. Lord Roulant taps one foot with the rigid determination of a man who has entirely lost the beat but refuses to admit it. Several guests murmur appreciation, though their eyes betray confusion. Everyone is performing enjoyment, because that is the unspoken rule. Musicians work hard, nobles reward effort. Even if the melody sounds like two barn doors arguing, the musicians transition into a livelier tune, one meant to inspire dancing, though the rhythm changes so abruptly that even the most graceful guests hesitate. A few brave souls attempt to sway along, but quickly abandon the effort when the lute unexpectedly bolts into a solo so intense it startles a servant carrying wine. The servant recovers admirably, bowing deeply as if nearly dropping a tray was part of an interpretive ritual. You offer applause between pieces, gentle and dignified, because anything stronger would imply genuine enthusiasm and set a dangerous precedent. The musicians beam under your polite praise. Encouragement is a currency, and you spend it sparingly. Knowing too much will embolden them to attempt something even more experimental next time. The final song of the evening arrives, a soft ballad about unrequited love or tragic heroism, or possibly a cow. Medieval lyrics often resist clarity. The melody, however, is soothing, drifting through the hall like warm smoke. You let yourself enjoy it, even though you suspect this moment of beauty is accidental rather than intentional. When the song ends, the musicians bow deeply, sweat shining on their foreheads, their faces glowing with anticipation. You rise and thank them with the grace expected of someone who has endured the full spectrum of artistic ambition. They look relieved, proud, and tired in a way that makes you appreciate them more than the music itself. The hall begins to empty, nobles drifting off to their chambers, while servants clear goblets and extinguish candles. As you walk toward the stairs, the echo of the evening's performance lingers in your ears, uneven and earnest. You cannot deny the truth you have learned tonight. Wealth surrounds you with beauty, comfort, and talent, but none of it comes with the guarantee that you will enjoy it. The artist stands in the solar long before you arrive, pacing in small, frantic circles as if he is trying to rehearse every possible version of success and failure at once. The moment you step through the doorway, he freezes, brushes wildly at his tunic to rid it of non-existent dust, and bows with a flourish that nearly topples him. His eyes shine with a mixture of excitement and terror, the emotional signature of every artist who has ever hoped a noble might rescue them from obscurity and debt. Sunlight pours through the window, casting long beams across the floor and illuminating the stretched canvas propped against the wall. It stands taller than the artist himself and is draped in a cloth that quivers from the tension in his hands. He hovers beside it like a man guarding a treasure he also suspects might embarrass him. You take a seat on the cushioned bench, and he takes this as the divine signal to begin his performance. He starts speaking before he even pulls the cloth free, words tumbling out in a frantic river. He explains his inspiration, the the symbolism, the technique he developed specifically for this piece, a technique he insists no other painter anywhere in the kingdom uses. You nod patiently, though half of what he says resembles unfiltered panic rather than artistic philosophy. He takes a breath so deep it could fuel a bellows. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he unveils the painting. You brace yourself for anything, and you need to. The portrait is bold. The colors are vivid enough to startle the furniture. Your likeness, because of course it is your likeness, stares back at you with eyes far more intense than your own, set into a face that somehow appears nobler, wiser, and possibly better rested than you have ever been in your life. The artist has elongated your posture, sharpened your expression, and adorned you with an aura that makes you look like a mythic hero who just finished slaying a dragon and is now contemplating deeper philosophical truths. It is not bad, but it is enthusiastic. The artist waits, breath held, fingers fluttering toward one another like nervous birds. Several servants linger by the door, pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. The moment stretches uncomfortably, the silence filling the solar like rising water. You summon your most diplomatic expression, the one that suggests appreciation without confirmation, and the artist seems to sag with relief. Convinced that your silence is awe rather than caution, he steps closer, pointing at the clothing in the painting. He describes the brushwork, the layering of pigments, the imported mineral used to achieve the particular shade of blue in your cloak. He tells you about the sleepless nights he spent adjusting the light on your face, and how he hopes, humbly but not subtly, that this piece might earn him a place among the great painters of the era. His voice softens when he mentions his family, the expenses he cannot meet, the apprentices he cannot afford to keep. Then he catches himself, straightens, and tries to reassemble his dignity. You see the truth woven between his words. Patronage is not an act of kindness, it is a lifeline. Nobles offer it in exchange for beauty, obedience, and sometimes prestige. Artists seek it for survival, for legitimacy, for the fragile hope that their creations will outlast their struggles. The artist before you is caught between reverence and desperation, and he wears both like ill-fitting garments. You rise and step toward the painting, examining it more closely. The colors are alive, vibrant, and the longer you look, the more you appreciate the skill beneath the dramatization. The strokes are confident. The light is clever. Your features, though idealized, hold something of your spirit, a quiet tension he somehow caught without asking. You realize then that even if the portrait is slightly grander than reality, the intention behind it is sincere. You offer your endorsement, calm and measured, promising him your patronage for future works. The artist nearly collapses with relief. His gratitude spills out in a torrent, his hands motioning wildly, as if your approval has rewound the exhaustion written into his bones. For a fleeting moment, he looks younger, lighter, almost radiant. You watch him gather his things, his face bright with new hope. And you understand something about your world that you rarely pause to ponder. Power is not always swords or coin. Sometimes it is simply the ability to say, yes. You sit in the council chamber, a room that has witnessed generations of decisions made over polished wood and thinly veiled tension. Sunlight filters through the high windows, striking the long table where your steward has arranged documents, family trees, and maps with the solemnity of a priest preparing sacred relics. You take your place at the head, knowing that today you are not a person so much as a piece in a quiet, ancient game where no move is simple and no victory comes without cost. The emissaries from the neighboring house arrive in a flurry of cloaks and polite stiffness. They bow low, rise slowly, and sit with the absolute minimum of comfort, as though sinking too deeply into their chairs might be misinterpreted as neediness. Their faces bear diplomatic smiles sharpened to the perfect level of neutrality. You recognize the expression well. It means we all know why we are here, but let us pretend otherwise for the next hour so we may sleep tonight without feeling entirely mercenary. Tea is poured. Polite remarks are exchanged. Someone compliments the architecture in a tone that suggests they only do so because discussing politics before the first cup is considered barbaric. You respond with equal softness, your voice measured, your posture impeccable. Only after this delicate prelude does the conversation slide, inevitably, into its true purpose. The emissary clears his throat and mentions his lord's daughter, a young woman described as charming and intelligent, though these words are so routine in marriage negotiations that you mentally translate them to "she has a pulse and a dowry." Your steward counters by mentioning your lineage, your lands, your stability, each phrase delivered with the gentle confidence of someone presenting undeniable facts wrapped in courtesy. The emissary nods vigorously, but the tension across his jaw betrays how badly his house needs this alliance. Or perhaps how badly they want something from you that cannot be stated outright. You listen, nodding where appropriate, calculating despite the calm on your face. Marriage alliances have nothing to do with affection. They are bridges over rivers too wide to cross alone. They bind fortunes, secure borders, strengthen influence, and muzzle enemies. Love, in these matters, is decorative at best. At worst, it is a liability. A map is unfurled across the table, your lands colored in one shade, theirs in another. The emissary leans forward, tapping areas that could be unified, fields that might benefit from shared labor, villages that could thrive under joint oversight. He speaks of prosperity with the rehearsed certainty of a man promised a reward for enthusiasm. Your steward listens, expression unreadable, before countering with matters of inheritance, trade rights, and the subtle but important question of who gains more in the long term. Their answers are smooth, but not perfect, and you detect the faint tremor of truth beneath their optimism. Their house is struggling, harvests have been fickle, a feud with a distant cousin threatens to split their loyalties. Their daughter, no doubt lovely in her own way, is the thread they offer to weave stability back into their tapestry. And you are the loom. The thought sits uncomfortably in your chest. You have always known your future was never entirely your own, but hearing it laid out in tidy lines of parchment, lineage, and land rights makes the reality more tangible than you would like. Still, you maintain composure. Nobles do not flinch at duty. Or rather, nobles are trained not to show it. When the emissary finally asks your stance, the room holds its breath. Even the servants seem to freeze mid-step, as though the outcome of this alliance will personally determine their next decade of employment. You glance at your steward, who gives the smallest nod, a signal that the terms are acceptable, beneficial even. The alliance would strengthen your hold on the region. It would bolster your influence in court. It would protect your house's future. Love is not mentioned once. You speak with calm resolve, offering agreement in the dignified tone expected of someone shaping the fate of two families. The emissary exhales in visible relief, bowing deeply as if the weight he carries is suddenly lighter. Papers are drafted, terms reviewed, arrangements set in motion with the slow inevitability of a tide turning. As the emissaries depart, their smiles wide and grateful, you remain seated. The chamber grows quiet again, sunlight shifting across the table like a silent witness. You feel the decision settle over you, not heavy, not cruel, simply real. You have secured your house's future. You have done what duty demands, and you have done it without speaking a single word about the one thing everyone pretends is irrelevant. Love has nothing to do with this, and perhaps that is the strangest truth of all. You start to notice it the way you notice a draft that slips under a door. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Your household, so polished on the surface, is not a single entity at all. It is a layered creature with shifting loyalties, invisible rivalries, and alliances that form and dissolve with the speed of rumors on market day. You walk through your own corridors and sense currents of quiet calculation swirling behind every bow and curtsy. The steward stands at the top of this delicate pyramid, of course, wielding more authority than some minor nobles, his calm voice capable of turning a servant's future to gold or ash. Beneath him, The senior chamberlain holds the keys to every room and the unofficial power to decide how fast a message travels, depending on how much he likes the sender that week. The cook commands the kitchen with a temperament that borders on tyrannical, and everyone tiptoes around her domain, because crossing her means bland meals for a fortnight. Rank, you realize, is less about title and more about whose wrath people fear. As you descend further into the household's layers, the order becomes less clear. Maids who smile sweetly at you exchange glances behind your back that speak of alliances forged over laundry piles, gossip, and survival. A stable boy with dirt on his boots seems to know more about the steward's private habits than you do. A scullery maid holds enough rumors to topple half the manor, though she would never say a word without the right audience. Everyone watches everyone. Everyone knows everything. Except you, of course. You are the one they avoid, burdening with truths that might upset the fragile illusion of noble authority. At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself that every household has politics, that this subtle tension is merely the natural hum of life beneath the roof of someone important. But the truth becomes harder to dismiss when two footmen nearly collide in the hallway and you catch the flicker of open hostility between them. One stiffens at your presence, the other bows too quickly, and the silence that follows is defensive, charged, as though your gaze alone might expose a feud you were never supposed to witness. You begin asking simple questions, nothing pointed, yet the answers vary depending on whom you ask. A maid tells you the laundress keeps to herself. The laundress tells you the maid cannot be trusted. The stable master insists the steward is a fair and patient man, while a footman mutters the steward has a temper sharpened by secrets. You hear them. You nod. You move on. And somewhere in your mind, a ledger opens, filling itself with threads that refuse to weave into a full picture. Even the old nurse who raised you, once a pillar of comfort, seems suddenly surrounded by unspoken rules. Two younger maids hover near her in the afternoons, eager to please, too eager perhaps, each trying to secure favor from the woman who knows the old stories of the manor, the scandals that precede your birth, the skeletons hidden long before your father wore his title. You wonder if they seek her kindness or her knowledge. You wonder which motive would be more unsettling. It is not that anyone is disloyal, at least not openly. They obey you, serve you, respect you. But beneath each polished action lies a shifting web of personal loyalties that have nothing to do with your authority. Friendships turn overnight into cold civility. Jealous glances flash between servants when one earns your praise. A misplaced compliment from you becomes fuel for whispered irritation in the servants' hall. You start to see the patterns. Who avoids whom? Who shares secrets? Who hoards them? Who flinches at the mention of another's name? And then comes the small moment that makes everything suddenly, painfully clear. A maid accidentally spills a pitcher while pouring your drink. The room freezes. Before you can even speak, two other servants step forward, not to help her, but to watch. Their eyes are sharp, hungry, waiting to see how you will respond, because your reaction will tilt the balance of their quiet war. You realize, in that suspended breath, that your household hangs not on rules written in any ledger, but on choices you make in seconds without thinking. You offer the maid a soft reassurance, and the room exhales. Relief ripples through them, but not evenly. Some look grateful. Others look disappointed. A few look almost calculating, as though recalculating their next move in a game you never chose to join. You sit back, the weight of it settling into your bones. Wealth gives you comfort, yes, but it also makes your household a world where every gesture has consequence. You are not just a noble to them, you are the weather. Your moods dictate their alliances. Your silence shapes their loyalties. Your kindness or severity tips invisible scales. You leave the room with a polite nod, but the knowledge follows you down the hall. You thought your servants lived beneath you in rank. Instead, they live around you, above you in insight, below you in freedom, beside you in constant observation. And in this grand, polished manner, loyalty is never fixed. It shifts, glimmers, darkens, reforms. Moving like clouds across a sky everyone pretends is clear. You feel the tension long before the dignitary arrives, like the charged stillness before a storm. Servants hurry through the manor with more purpose than usual, adjusting tapestries, polishing already polished silver, muttering reminders to each other as though the guest might materialize early, just to catch them breathing wrong. The steward informs you of the schedule in a tone that suggests this visit is less an honor and more a test. You nod calmly, though inside, your thoughts scamper like startled mice. When the dignitary finally rides through your gate, flanked by guards dressed in colors that scream importance, you stand waiting with your most diplomatic expression. The guest dismounts, smiling with too many teeth, a smile that never touches the eyes. Those eyes flick over you. Then the manor, then the servants line neatly behind you. Every glance feels like a silent evaluation you cannot quite pass. When the dignitary bows, it is just low enough to acknowledge your rank and just shallow enough to remind you it is not as high as theirs. Inside the hall, you guide them through the ceremonial greetings, the careful compliments, the fragile dance of noble hospitality. You offer wine. They accept, but with a look that implies your wine is slightly suspicious. They comment on your estate. You thank them, though their tone makes you wonder if they are admiring it or measuring its value. Every word they speak slides across the table like a blade disguised as courtesy. You smile back, because that is what nobles do when danger arrives wearing silk. You notice the servants stealing nervous glances. They feel the shift too. The dignitary carries authority like a second cloak, shimmering and heavy. You can tell from the way your steward stands a little straighter, the way the knights at the door shift their weight as though bracing for impact. Even the cook has emerged from her kingdom for a look, gripping her apron as if ready to duel insults with pastry. During the meal, the dignitary asks questions that seem polite but pry deeper than they should. They inquire about your harvests, your alliances, your neighbors. The words are sheathed, but you sense the steel beneath. You answer carefully, weaving honesty and vagueness in equal measure. You can almost hear your tutor's old voice telling you that nobles never ask what they truly want to know. They circle like hawks, waiting for you to reveal a weakness in your own flight pattern. When the dignitary compliments your household, it feels like a test. When they laugh at your jest, it feels choreographed. Even their silence feels strategic, carefully placed like a chess piece meant to corner you. You sip your wine to steady yourself, though the wine suddenly tastes like responsibility. A moment arrives when the dignitary leans forward, hands folded, eyes sharp as frost. They speak of regional tensions, disputes, the subtle whisper of potential alliances. Their tone remains light, as though discussing weather, but each sentence pushes closer to a line you cannot afford to cross. You keep your features serene, though your pulse is busy attempting an escape. You know that one wrong answer, one careless tone, could shift the balance of your lands for seasons to come. Your knights watch from the edge of the hall, alert in a way they rarely are during feasts. They sense something simmering beneath the polished diplomacy. You feel it too. The entire room becomes a stage, and the dignitary pulls at the strings as though testing which ones might snap. You steer the conversation into safer waters, offering anecdotes, harmless details, small talk so light it could float away. To your relief, the dignitary follows, though their expression hints they know exactly what you are doing. You keep smiling anyway. Nobility is survival dressed as grace. After the feast, you escort the dignitary to their prepared chambers. They pause at the doorway, offering one final smile, wide and gleaming. It is the kind of smile that says, "Thank you for your hospitality, and also, I know where you keep your vulnerabilities." You bow, maintaining perfect decorum, though your spine feels carved from tension. When the door closes, you let out a slow breath. Your steward appears as if summoned by exhaustion, offering a quiet observation that the dignitary seemed pleased. You nod, though you know pleasure is not the point of such visits. Power is, influence is, testing is. You return to your chamber, shoulders finally dropping now that the performance is over. The dignitary sleeps under your roof tonight, a guest whose presence feels like a diplomatic riddle wrapped in velvet. You lie awake longer than you admit, listening to the subtle sounds of the manor settling into uneasy sleep, knowing that even in rest, the weight of nobility never truly leaves the room. It begins with a whisper, the kind that drifts through corridors before anyone admits it aloud. A servant coughing in the early morning, a scullery maid pale enough to make the cook send her home, a stable boy slumped against a stall door, claiming he just needs a moment before standing, though he does not stand. You hear these things in passing, the murmured warnings tucked behind polite greetings, the nervous glances between staff who pretend everything is fine. But nothing spreads faster than worry, not even illness itself. By midday, your steward requests a private word. His expression is controlled, steady, but his hands are clasped too tightly. He mentions symptoms in the lower village, a few cases near the mill, a rumor of a fever that lingers like smoke. You feel a tightening in your chest, though you nod calmly, analyzing, calculating, pretending you are harder to shake than you truly are. Illness is an old threat, familiar and impartial. Nobles like to believe their stone walls and silver coins make them less vulnerable. But the truth slips in through cracks no wealth can seal. You order precautions, measured ones at first, limit visitors, increase hygiene in the kitchens, isolate anyone showing signs of fever. The steward bows, grateful for your decisiveness, though you notice the tremor in his voice when he assures you the situation is manageable. That word, manageable, floats uneasily between you. You have heard it used many times in noble circles. It has never once been accurate. By evening, the manor feels different. The usual hum of activity has quieted into a tense murmur, footsteps softer, voices hushed. Servants move with caution, as if sound itself might carry sickness. You see fear hiding behind their forced smiles. These people serve you daily, bring you food, wash your linens, tend your horses. You realize, with uncomfortable clarity, that illness moving through them inches closer to you with every task they perform, and still they work, because your comfort does not pause even when the world grows fragile. Word arrives that 2 villagers have died. You sit with that knowledge for a moment longer than decorum allows, staring at your hands. The candle flame beside you flickers, its light a reminder of how easily life trembles under the slightest breath of misfortune. You could barricade the manor, seal the gates, pretend your lineage grants immunity, but you know illness is a visitor that ignores titles. You meet with the steward again, a quiet conversation held in a room that suddenly feels too small. He suggests restricting movement further, offering that perhaps nobles should avoid direct contact with servants for a few days. The thought tastes bitter, like nobles preserving their own safety by stepping back just when fear presses hardest on those beneath them. Yet you nod, because stepping forward into danger would help no one. Somewhere in your mind, an old lesson echoes. Leadership means making choices that leave no one satisfied, least of all yourself. Over the next days, the manor becomes its own world. Meals are left at doors, messages are passed through gloved hands. You wash more often than you ever thought necessary, scrubbing until your skin protests. You avoid touching your face. You avoid touching anyone. Wealth surrounds you, yet you feel strangely exposed, as though illness could slip through your clothes, your walls, your certainty. One night, unable to sleep, you walk the corridor just outside the guest wing. A maid sits slumped against the wall, eyes glazed with exhaustion. She startles when she notices you, trying to rise too quickly. You gently insist she stay seated. Her voice quivers as she explains that half the staff has taken ill or been sent to rest, and those who remain are doing the work of many. She insists she is fine. You can see she is lying. Something inside you tightens. Nobility teaches you to maintain distance. Humanity urges you to kneel beside her. You choose a middle path. You summon help and make sure she is tended to, though the guilt lingers like a shadow following close behind. News arrives from the village. The spread is slowing. Precautions have taken hold. Deaths have not increased. The steward reports this with the weary relief of a man who has been holding his breath for days. You exhale too, though not fully. Illness does not vanish so quickly. It fades the way storms do, lingering just beyond sight, ready to return. Still, the worst seems to pass, and the staff begins to move with something close to normalcy again. Laughter returns in small, careful doses. The kitchens fill with familiar smells. Your household, resilient in the way those accustomed to hardship often are, begins to stitch itself back together. You walk through the courtyard one morning and feel a thin strand of sunlight cut across your face. For the first time in days, you let yourself enjoy it. The world continues. Life recalibrates. But something inside you has shifted. Riches can buy comfort, walls, guards, spices from far-off lands, but they cannot purchase certainty. They cannot shield your lungs, or your pulse, or the fragile truth that you are as human as anyone living beyond your gates. And in that fragile truth, there is something strangely grounding. The dispute reaches you not through formal channels, but through the unmistakable ripple of tension that travels ahead of angry voices. You are crossing the courtyard when two retainers stride toward each other with the kind of stiff-backed hostility that suggests either a grievance or an impending duel. Their argument swells loudly enough to silence the stable hands. By the time they notice your presence, both men stumble into hurried bows, each insisting that the other is entirely at fault. You lead them into the council room, where disagreements are expected to behave themselves under the weight of carved beams and solemn tapestries. The steward joins you, settling into a posture that signals weary readiness. The two retainers take their places, though one sits with righteous stiffness while the other looks as though he would melt through the chair if shame would let him. Their stories begin in unison, then overlap, then race each other toward contradiction. One claims land rights were dishonored. The other claims an insult to family. Both insist they are victims. Both insist the other owes recompense. And both keep glancing at you, waiting for your expression to tilt toward sympathy or irritation or something they can use as leverage. You listen, sorting through the tangle of claims. One man is older, with years of service marked in the lines of his face and the confident certainty of someone accustomed to being heard. The younger retainer speaks more quickly, stumbling over his words, desperate to sound composed but betraying the fear that his status may weigh less in your eyes. You realize, as you watch them, that the dispute is only half about land or insult. The hidden half is about hierarchy, pride, and the delicate ladder of influence everyone climbs in a noble household. When the younger retainer presents his evidence, it sounds reasonable but thin. When the elder speaks, his argument is thicker, more polished, the kind that comes from experience in surviving these rooms. The steward shifts slightly toward him, subtle but noticeable, and you catch it. The bend, the first tug of gravity pulling justice toward the side with more standing. You have seen this before. Disputes in households like yours rarely hinge on facts. They hinge on relationships, usefulness, the quiet reputation a man carries behind him. Nobles speak of justice as an unwavering scale, but you know the truth. The scale leans, sometimes gently, sometimes boldly, but it leans all the same. You ask more questions, pushing deeper, peeling back the layers of pride. The room grows warmer as tempers flare again, the elder retainer slipping into the confidence of someone who expects to win, while the younger grows defensive, his words sharpening under the fear that losing here could stain his standing for seasons. At last, when the stories have knotted themselves into a tight braid of half-truths and bruised dignity, you dismiss them to the hall while you confer privately with the steward. He suggests siding with the elder, citing years of loyalty and the importance of maintaining strong ties with men of influence. The argument is logical, comfortable, predictable, yet something in the younger retainer's trembling earnestness lingers in your thoughts. When they return, both men straighten, bracing themselves. You speak calmly, outlining a decision that surprises them both. You divide responsibility rather than placing full blame. The younger retainer must apologize for acting rashly. The elder must compensate for the damage done, though less than the younger requested. You assign shared duties to force cooperation for the next few weeks, a subtle way of ensuring neither man can dismiss the other without consequence. The elder's jaw tightens. The younger exhales relief so quietly you almost miss it. The steward gives you a sideways glance, not disapproving, but assessing. This solution satisfies neither man completely, which means it satisfies you. Justice in a noble household is rarely a clean line. It is more often a negotiated curve. As the retainers depart with stiff bows, you feel the subtle shift in the room's air. The steward nods, acknowledging your choice, though you sense he is filing it away for future consideration. In noble life, even fair play becomes information, and everyone keeps score. You linger after they leave, listening to the fading footsteps in the hallway. You have restored peace, for now, but you have also learned something heavy and uncomfortably true. Justice does not stand above status here. It walks beside it, trying not to stumble. The morning of the festival arrives with a sort of restless cheer that sweeps through the manor before you have even opened your eyes. Servants rush past your chamber door carrying garlands, candles, ribbons, and baskets of bread, moving with the frantic energy of people who know they will be judged for any imperfection. Outside, you hear the faint sound of pipes warming up, the kind of earnest practice that promises either delightful music or unintentional torment. Festivals bring out the best in everyone, you think, and also the most chaotic. You step into the courtyard dressed in garments reserved for public celebration, rich fabrics that shimmer but feel less like clothing and more like reminders of expectations. A small crowd is already gathering, villagers mingling with minor nobles, all carrying that particular festival smile that tries to look joyful but also wary because no one wants to be the first to misstep around someone of higher rank. Children run in circles chasing each other with garlands, unbothered by the complicated rules that trap adults like insects caught in amber. When you greet the villagers, they bow or curtsy too formally for such a lively day, and you spend the first portion of the morning urging them to enjoy themselves, which has the opposite effect at first, because the moment nobles encourage casualness, everyone panics about how casual is too casual. Eventually, the nervous stiffness thaws, and the festival truly begins. The first event is the ceremonial blessing of the harvest, a ritual in which you pour water over a carved wooden emblem while everyone nods solemnly. The priest recites verses that blend divine gratitude with a hint of political awareness as he mentions the importance of cooperation between church and noble house. You have heard these words before, but on festival days they echo louder, amplified by the watching crowd. After the blessing, music erupts, swirling through the air in uneven harmonies that are somehow charming despite their lack of coordination. A circle of dancers forms, and you are drawn into it by well-meaning villagers who seem both honored and terrified to take your hands. You step lightly, smile often, and do your best not to stand on anyone's feet. Laughter rises around you, genuine, unguarded, softened by sunlight and warm bread, and the relief of a day when work pauses and joy is permitted. Yet even here, even now, the politics flow under the surface like a hidden current. Nobles from neighboring lands stroll through the festivities with eyes too keen to be recreational. They observe how your villagers greet you, how your knights maintain order, how your steward handles logistics. They offer compliments coated in implications, smiling wide enough to seem warm but not wide enough to hide curiosity. Every friendly toast feels like a measured assessment. Every shared drink is a negotiation wearing flowers in its hair. The feast begins at midday, long tables spread with dishes that test the strength of the wood beneath them, roasted game, spiced vegetables, honeyed pastries, fresh cheeses, and fruit piled like treasure. You sit at the head table where you are expected to look both pleased and impartial as you taste the dishes offered by different households, all hoping for your approval to elevate their status. You compliment each one with careful diplomacy, ensuring no cook feels slighted enough to declare a quiet vendetta. Villagers take turns performing songs and stories. Some are surprisingly talented. Others deliver enthusiastic efforts that require you to master the art of appreciative nodding. A particularly ambitious young man gives a speech about loyalty to the noble line that sounds rehearsed by someone hoping to earn employment. The nobles applaud politely. The villagers cheer loudly. You smile, though part of you hears the faint tremor beneath his words, the hunger of someone navigating invisible ladders. As the afternoon unfolds, games begin. Sack races, archery displays, a contest where grown men attempt to climb a greased pole for a prize no one actually wants, but everyone competes for anyway. You present the ribbons and crown a few victors with flowers, noting how each acceptance, humble or smug, feeds into the unspoken social fabric that weaves across your lands. By evening, lanterns glow along the paths, casting warm halos across the festival grounds. The music shifts into slower melodies, the kind people sway to rather than dance. You feel lighter than you have in days, warmed by the mingling scents of spice and smoke, buoyed by laughter that finally feels effortless. And yet the day leaves you thoughtful too. Festivals are supposed to unify, to celebrate abundance, to remind everyone that life can be sweet, but they also reveal the subtle choreography of power, the ways people watch you not only with affection, but expectation. Measuring how well you embody the role they depend on, you walk back toward the manor as the final song drifts through the air, its notes soft and wistful. The lanterns flicker in the growing dusk. Behind you, the villagers celebrate freely now, unburdened by noble presence. Ahead of you, the manor stands quiet, waiting for you to return to the responsibilities left waiting on your desk. The festival was joyful. It truly was. But it was also a reminder that even celebration, in your world, is never just celebration. It is performance, diplomacy, reassurance, and hope, woven together with ribbons that shine brightly but tighten quietly around your role. The storm announces itself long before it arrives, rumbling over the horizon with a low, distant growl that unsettles even the animals in their stalls. The air grows sharper by the hour, the kind of cold that bites through layers of wool and pride with equal efficiency. By dusk, the sky has turned the color of iron, heavy and waiting. You stand on the manor steps and feel the wind coil around you, carrying the unmistakable promise of a night that intends to test everyone beneath it. When the first snow begins to fall, it does not drift gently. It drives. It slashes across the courtyard in frantic white streaks, swirling like a nest of furious spirits unleashed from some forgotten mountain. Servants hurry about, latching shutters, securing roofs, hauling extra wood to the storerooms. Their movements carry a speed that is almost instinctual. Medieval winters do not negotiate. They arrive demanding everything at once. You retreat inside, though the cold follows you through the door in one last gust, rattling the torches as if offended by your attempt to escape it. The great hall fills slowly with people seeking warmth. The hearth roars with a fire built larger than usual, its flames leaping up the chimney like a creature desperate to prove it can outshine the storm outside. You settle near it, the heat hitting your face while your back remains chilled, a reminder that comfort is uneven even for nobles in winter. The wind grows louder. It moans against the stone walls, pressing into every crack, every gap, searching for a way inside. The banners flutter violently, their shadows jumping across the walls like startled figures. A few children huddle near their mothers, eyes wide, clinging to bread rolls as though carbs might protect them from nature. A knight tries to appear unbothered, but the way he glances at the roof beams betrays old memories of storms that ended badly. Your steward approaches with a report, though his usual composure flickers under the weight of the night. A shed near the stables has already lost half its roof. 2 servants will need to stay awake to manage the livestock. The kitchen fears the bread ovens may not keep their fires lit if the wind changes direction. You nod, offering instructions in a voice steadier than you feel. Nobility demands calm, even when the world outside is trying its best to peel your confidence apart like old bark. Hours pass. The storm grows ferocious. Snow piles against the manor walls, rising higher than the windowsills. The roof groans under the weight, and you feel every vibration of it in your ribs. The torches sputter, fighting for air as the wind claws at the chimney. A young servant shivers as she carries more logs into the hall, and you catch her sleeve before she scurries off, insisting she rest by the fire for a moment. Gratitude flashes across her face, quickly hidden so no one accuses her of receiving special treatment. You step to a window and try to peer outside, but the world has been erased. Nothing exists beyond the glass except swirling white, a chaos of flakes falling so thick they look almost solid. For the first time in a long time, the outside feels like another world entirely, a world with no patience for rank, titles, or ownership. Winter storms bow to no one. You feel a strange tightness in your chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Wealth may soften many hardships, but it cannot warm the entire manor. It cannot stop roofs from breaking. It cannot command the sky to show mercy. You understand now why villagers pray for mild winters with the devotion some save for saints. Survival is not guaranteed, not even here. The fire crackles behind you, snapping you back into the warmth. People settle on benches, wrapped in blankets, sharing quiet conversation that sounds more like reassurance than talk. The cook hands out bowls of stew, thick and steaming, her earlier irritability transformed into a fierce kind of tenderness. Even nobles sit closer tonight, recognizing without speaking that storms like this level the ground under everyone's feet. Near midnight, the wind reaches its wildest peak, howling with such force that it seems to shake the very bones of the manor. For a brief moment the hall falls silent, as if everyone is listening to the sky's temper and wondering whether the walls will hold. You find yourself holding your breath, but slowly, gradually, the rage weakens. The howling becomes a sigh. The sigh softens into a long, weary exhale. Snow continues to fall, but it no longer thrashes. It drifts. The storm has spent its fury. You close your eyes and let the relief wash through you. Tonight has reminded you of something you sometimes forget. For all your comforts, your silks, your authority, and your stone walls, medieval life is always one hard winter away from feeling painfully small. It begins as a faint crackle somewhere in the manor, the kind of sound you might mistake for a log settling in the hearth or a servant shifting a crate in the storeroom. But then the smell arrives, sharp, acrid, wrong. It slips under the door like a warning whispered directly into your lungs. You rise from your seat before your mind has fully formed the thought, moving down the corridor with a growing sense of unease as the scent thickens and curls around the air like an unwelcome guest. By the time you reach the far wing, shouting has already broken through the stillness. Servants rush past you carrying buckets, their faces pale with fear, their steps frantic. Someone calls your name, but the words dissolve into the rising chaos. You push forward, heart hammering, and turn the corner just in time to see orange light flickering against the stone walls. The fire dances wildly at the base of a wooden partition, a twisting, greedy thing that wastes no time claiming anything foolish enough to be made of timber. Flames spread upward with frightening speed, licking along beams and swallowing tapestries that took months to weave. The heat hits you in a sudden wave, startling in its intensity, forcing you back even as instinct urges you forward. A servant tries to beat the flames with a soaked cloth, but the fire surges upward in defiance, spitting sparks that scatter across the floor like tiny messengers delivering bad news. Someone else throws a bucket of water, and the steam hisses angrily, curling around the flames without truly taming them. You feel the first tremor of fear settle in your chest, sharp and cold, because you realize how fragile everything around you actually is. You have grown used to stone walls, high ceilings, thick doors. You assume these things make you safe. But fire does not care for architecture. Fire does not negotiate. Fire takes. You shout orders. your voice louder than you expected, steady despite the panic clawing at the edges of your thoughts. Servants respond immediately, forming a line from the nearest well, buckets moving hand to hand with desperate rhythm. Others tear down flammable tapestries before the flames can reach them, coughing as smoke thickens the air. Even your steward, usually composed enough to stare down nobles without blinking, looks shaken as he directs people to clear furniture away from the burning wall. The flames crackle louder, feeding on dry timber, growing bold. For a moment, the fire flares so fiercely it feels alive, a creature rearing its head. Heat pushes against your face, forcing you to shield your eyes. You step back, realizing that even authority wavers in the presence of something so wild. Smoke coils through the corridor, clinging to your clothes, stinging your eyes. The air tastes bitter, heavy. You cough hard, pressing a sleeve to your nose and mouth. The room feels smaller now, brighter in a terrible way. You watch the fire climb toward a carved wooden beam overhead, one you have admired for years without noticing how combustible it is, and then something in the chaos shifts. Buckets land where they need to. Water hits the flame's base again and again. Servants soaked in sweat and smoke refuse to yield. Little by little, the fire flickers instead of roars. It shrinks from bright orange to angry red to stubborn ember. The beam above remains scorched but standing. The last sparks die with a hiss, fading into a curl of pale smoke that drifts upward like a final exhale. Silence follows, broken only by coughing, panting, and the soft dripping of water onto the stone floor. You stand in the damp wreckage, surrounded by charred wood and scorched walls that still radiate faint warmth. A tapestry lies crumpled on the floor, half burned, half saved. A servant's hands shake as he sets down an empty bucket. Your steward leans heavily against the wall, his composure cracked just enough to show the fear he hid during the worst of it. You look around, taking in the damage. It is not catastrophic. The manor still stands. The fire did not reach the main hall or the upper floors, but the truth hangs in the smoky air. All this luxury, all this beauty, all these comforts, they can vanish in a single spark. You feel the weight of that knowledge settle into you. Fire does not care about wealth. It does not care about titles or lineage. It sees wood, cloth, air, and opportunity. You imagine how different this night could have been, how quickly everything might have been reduced to a pile of ashes glowing in the moonlight. As servants begin the quiet work of cleaning, you step back from the burned wall, your clothes smelling of smoke, your throat raw. You walk away slowly, the memory of the flames still burning behind your eyes. Tonight has taught you something stark and unforgettable. Luxury feels permanent until you watch it try to burn. The war room feels colder than the corridors outside it, as if the stone itself absorbs every whispered fear before anyone can name it aloud. You step inside and find your advisors already gathered around the long table, their expressions tight, their postures stiff, their hands clasped as though warming themselves on anxieties they refuse to show. Maps stretch across the table's surface, weighed down by candle holders and carved figures marking borders, alliances, and the kind of uncertainties that make even confident men shift uncomfortably. Your steward begins the meeting with a polite cough that sounds far more nervous than he intends. He gestures toward a section of the map representing lands several days' ride away. A neighboring lord has been making noise again, the kind of noise that carries a hint of ambition beneath diplomatic phrasing. Your advisors speak cautiously, circling the topic as if trying not to poke a sleeping predator. They mention increased patrols near his border, whispers among merchants, a subtle change in the tone of his letters. Nothing outright threatening, but nothing comforting either. You listen with steady expression, though your stomach tightens. Nobles rarely announce their intentions plainly. They send ripples, hints, polite greetings with sharpened edges. The advisors argue in gentle tones about how concerned you should be. One insists it is posturing. Another warns that posturing often precedes action. The steward proposes sending a gift to ease tensions. The marshal suggests sending soldiers to remind them tension is unwise. They look to you, waiting for some sign of which path you lean toward, each one hoping you will validate their instinct. Before you can answer, the conversation shifts. The threats far away are easier to discuss. The ones closer to home require more delicate handling. Your advisors exchange glances, the kind people share when approaching a topic no one wants to hold. The steward clears his throat again, softer this time, and mentions rumors within the local gentry. A wealthy cousin chafing at your authority. A merchant withholding supplies to pressure better trade terms. A minor noble hosting suspicious gatherings under the guise of social evenings. None of these things alone mean danger. Together they form a pattern. You feel the room tighten as your advisors describe each subtle challenge, each quiet friction, each alliance that may be tilting out of sight. Politics, you realize, is not a battlefield. It is a net. Threads pull, shift, loosen, and tighten without warning. And today, you are examining a net that shows several worrying strands. Your marshal speaks next, his voice steady but grim. Bandits have grown bolder near the forest road. Not enough to threaten the manor directly, but enough that travelers are whispering fearfully. Enough that your knights are requesting reinforcements for their patrols. He does not say what everyone thinks. Instability attracts opportunists. If your enemies sense weakness, even imagined weakness, they may act. The steward counters by reminding everyone of your recent successes, your strong alliances, your respected name. He speaks with loyalty you do not question. Yet even as he speaks, you see the strain behind his eyes. Words can soothe concerns, but facts hold weight, and the facts before you form a constellation of unease. The advisors continue, each voice adding to the landscape of threats near and far. You listen to them talk about crops, coin shortages, shifting loyalties, and the unpredictable behavior of men who want more than they should. You feel the weight of responsibility settle heavier on your shoulders with every sentence. Leadership, you think, is not about reacting to crises. It is about sensing them before they take shape. At last, the conversation fades, leaving the crackle of the candles to fill the silence. The advisors look at you expectantly. Their faces reflect trust, but also fear, because they know as well as you do that some choices cannot be unmade once spoken aloud. You take a slow breath, letting the quiet stretch just long enough to steady your thoughts. Then you speak, not with grand declarations, but with measured clarity. You call for stronger patrols, but no displays of aggression. You request letters sent to certain nobles, not groveling, not threatening, but carefully crafted reminders of shared benefit. You order an inquiry into the merchant's motives, handled discreetly. You instruct the steward to gather more information about the cousin whose ambition seems to be blooming inconveniently fast. Your advisors nod, their relief subtle but noticeable. They needed direction. You provided it, but the truth settles inside you anyway. Threats do not always march with banners. Sometimes they whisper from across borders. Sometimes they sit at your own table. And ruling, you realize, is less about commanding strength and more about sensing danger in the quiet between conversations. The castle is silent at midnight in a way it never is during the day, as though the very stones are holding their breath. You walk with a small lantern in hand, its light a trembling circle that follows you down each corridor, stretching your shadow across the walls like a long, uncertain echo. The air is cooler now, tinged with the faint scent of smoke from dying hearths and the softness of night settling over the world. Servants have long since retired. Even the guards speak in murmurs, as if unwilling to disturb the hush that blankets everything. The chapel door stands open when you arrive, a thin ribbon of candlelight spilling into the hallway. Inside, the priest and a few villagers kneel in quiet reverence. Their faces glow softly in the flickering light, eyes half closed, hands folded. This is the vigil, held each year at the turning of the season, a moment meant for reflection and remembrance. for acknowledging the fragile line that separates life from whatever waits beyond it. You step in slowly, letting the stillness wrap around you. The priest offers you a nod, one respectful enough to acknowledge your rank, but gentle enough to remind you that in this room, rank means almost nothing. Everyone kneels the same, everyone breathes the same, everyone will die the same. You choose a place near the front, lowering yourself onto the cold stone floor, the chill seeping into your knees. The candles flicker in the draft, casting shifting halos on the worn likenesses of saints etched into the walls. You close your eyes. The silence settles deeper. At first your mind fights it. Thoughts skitter across your awareness like restless birds. Plans for tomorrow, worries about threats far and near. The endless list of duties waiting at dawn, but slowly, the quiet steadies you. The rhythm of soft breathing around you becomes its own kind of music, unpolished and human. You inhale, slow and deliberate, and as your mind empties, something softer moves into the space it leaves behind. You think of your childhood running across fields without concern for borders or alliances, laughing with a freedom you did not know you would one day miss. You think of your parents, their faces half blurred by time, their lessons not. You think of how you learned, piece by piece, that life is not a story of triumphs, but a careful balancing act between fears you name and fears you hide. The candles burn lower. Beside you, a villager murmurs a prayer for a lost child. Across the room, the priest speaks a soft blessing for a sick relative he knows will not live another season. A young man farther back whispers something about forgiveness, so quietly you almost cannot hear him. These tiny confessions feel strange to witness, not because they are foreign, but because they are honest in a way daily life seldom allows. You shift your gaze to the altar. A single candle stands at its center, taller than all the others, flame steady and unwavering. Its simplicity strikes you more deeply than you expect. That one flame becomes a mirror in your mind, reflecting how much of your life has been shaped by forces you pretend to control. Birth, death, illness, fortune. None of these care about wealth. None bow to nobility. You can influence armies, shape alliances, command hundreds of lives. But your own body listens only to time. The truth arrives quietly, not with fear, but with a kind of resignation you can finally admit to. You will not live forever. Your name might survive in records or songs, perhaps engraved in a tapestry or remembered by a grandchild who never truly knew you. But the person you are now, the one who kneels in this dim chapel with chilled fingers and a restless heart, will fade. Mortality does not ask permission. It simply waits. And yet the thought does not crush you. It steadies you. Because knowing you are finite makes every decision matter differently. Every kindness feels heavier. Every failure becomes something survivable rather than defining. You breathe again, deeper this time, and the air feels warmer. The priest rings a small bell, the sound soft but piercing in the quiet. The vigil ends. The candles flicker one final time before they are extinguished, plunging the chapel into darkness broken only by moonlight through high windows. You rise slowly, knees stiff, and the others rise with you, moving as one, united in a simplicity you rarely share. As you step back into the hallway, lantern in hand, the silence follows you. The castle no longer feels like stone or duty. It feels like a place where someone lives, someone mortal, someone who, for a few quiet minutes, remembered what that truly means. The manor feels unusually quiet in the late afternoon light, as though the walls themselves are giving you space to think. You sit near a window overlooking the inner courtyard, watching sunlight drift over the stone and noticing for the first time how gentle it looks. There is no feast being prepared, no dignitary demanding attention, no festival music drifting in through the gates. For once, you are simply still, and the stillness uncovers thoughts you have been pushing aside for longer than you want to admit. You rest your hands on the armrests of the carved chair, tracing the delicate patterns etched there generations before you were born. Wealth surrounds you everywhere you look. Tapestries woven with silk, furniture carved from rare wood, jewels set in the metal of the window latch. You have worn fine clothes your whole life, eaten meals fit for 50, lived in rooms warmed by fires others built for you. Privilege has been the air you breathe, so ever-present that noticing it feels like discovering your own heartbeat. But recently, something has shifted. Maybe it was the illness that swept through the village. Maybe it was the fire that nearly devoured a piece of your home. Maybe it was the vigil. The soft candles burning down to nothing while you felt time pressing gently but insistently at your back. Whatever the cause, you look now at the world you have always known and find yourself asking questions you once thought unnecessary. You remember walking through your gardens, surrounded by beauty you did not plant. You remember offering patronage to the artist whose hands trembled because his entire future rested on your approval. You remember settling disputes between retainers, so concerned with rank they forgot they were human. All these moments slip through your mind, each one carrying a quiet truth you did not want to face. Privilege has made your life comfortable, but it has also made it strangely distant. You think of the villagers who bowed with genuine gratitude when you walked among them, their eyes bright despite harsh winters and harder work. Their lives are not cushioned by tapestries and soft beds. Yet sometimes, in their laughter during festivals or their tender murmurs at vigils, they seem to hold something you cannot quite name, something simpler, something steadier. You remember watching your knights train, the clang of steel echoing through the yard. Their purpose is clear, in a way yours often is not. They protect, they defend, they bleed for the things you command. You sit at a table making decisions that affect them all, yet your hands remain clean, while theirs bear scars. You wonder if this imbalance is simply the way of the world, or if you have allowed it to become heavier than it needs to be. Your eyes drift to the courtyard, where a group of servants cross paths, exchanging a small laugh before resuming their tasks. Their ease strikes you. They do not have the luxury of long reflection, yet somehow they find meaning in their days without waiting for permission to feel it. Perhaps they know something you are only just learning. You think back to the dignitary whose smile concealed threats, to the disputes shaped more by pride than truth, to the advisors discussing dangers that shift like wind. Wealth creates a fortress, but it also invites storms. Privilege gives you choices, yet each choice comes tangled with consequences that ripple far beyond your own life. For the first time, you ask yourself not what you should do as a noble, but what you want to be as a person. The question settles heavily, but not unkindly. You look out again at the sunlight warming the courtyard stones. It seems to soften every corner, even the ones you never noticed until now. You take a slow breath, and the air feels different, not lighter, not heavier, but clearer. You understand, suddenly and quietly, that privilege is not the destination you always assumed. It is merely the starting point. What matters now is what you build with it. Not the walls, not the wealth, not the legacy carved into stone, but the impact you leave on the lives that intersect with yours every single day. The realization does not come with fireworks or epiphanies. It comes with the soft, steady certainty of a truth long overdue. Luxury may shape your world, but the choices you make shape the person you become. Dawn arrives quietly, slipping over the hills in pale ribbons that touch the manor rooftops before they reach you. You stand by your window, watching the first faint light gather on the stones, as though it is deciding whether to wake the world gently or startle it awake. The air carries the last trace of night's coolness, soft and clean, a reminder that every day begins unclaimed. You breathe it in, feeling something inside you shift, something small but certain. The courtyard below stirs slowly. A stable hand crosses toward the horses with the sleepy gait of someone not quite blended into the morning yet. Two maids share a quiet joke as they carry linens to be aired, their laughter drifting upward like a warm thread weaving through the chill. A young guard yawns so widely you worry he might unhinge something. These small scenes feel different today, not because they are new, but because you are seeing them with a clarity sharpened by everything you have witnessed. You dress without calling for assistance, surprising the servant posted outside your chamber. His eyes widen as you wave him off. You still wear fine garments, woven from fabrics most people never touch. But today you feel the weight of them differently. They are not armor. They are not symbols. They are simply clothes you choose to put on. And that choice feels oddly grounding. Stepping into the corridor, you move slowly, letting the manor greet you in its own quiet way. The tapestries look softer in the morning light. The polished floors smell faintly of wood, oil, and yesterday's fire. Somewhere in the distance, the cook is already barking instructions, her voice a familiar anchor reminding you that life continues with or without your introspection. You pass through the great hall, where sunlight spills in uneven slabs across the long table. You remember feasts, arguments, gossip, negotiations, moments of triumph tangled with moments heavy enough to leave shadows. Wealth has given you a seat at this table for as long as you can remember, yet now you notice it is only wood, worn at the edges, its grandeur softened by countless hands. Outside, the morning settles over the estate. You walk toward the gardens, drawn by the memory of blossoms glowing in golden light. The ground is still cool, the grass damp beneath your boots. When you reach the wisteria canopy, its blossoms shift slightly in the breeze, releasing a faint fragrance that makes the world feel sweeter than it has any right to be. You sit on the marble bench and let the stillness gather around you. Here, where so much beauty depends on the labor and loyalty of countless hands, the shimmering truth of medieval wealth reveals itself again. Luxury is never just luxury. It is responsibility, pressure, comfort, distance, expectation, and illusion woven into one shimmering thread. It gives you everything and demands everything in return. It shields you and exposes you at the same time. It lets you rise above hardship and yet binds you to problems that have nothing to do with hunger or cold, but weigh just as heavily. You think of the fire, the storm, the illness, the nights spent in quiet dread. You think of the festivals, the feasts, the soft melodies drifting through your hall. You think of the people whose lives orbit yours, all playing their roles in a world you were born into without choosing. You think of the privileges you hold and the truths you have learned, each one pushing against the next until something inside you changed. The sun rises higher. You feel its warmth against your face, gentle at first, then stronger. You tilt your head toward it, closing your eyes for a moment, as if letting the light settle the choice forming quietly in your chest. You understand now that wealth does not define you unless you let it. It can shape your days, guide your status, and ease your path, but it can never decide your character. Only you can do that, and you realize that perhaps this is the real treasure hidden inside all the glittering surfaces of your life. Not the gold, not the feasts, not the silk, or the power, or the reputation. The truth is simple. You can choose who you become, even in a world that decided so much for you. As the dawn brightens, you rise from the bench and walk back toward the manor, the sunlight at your back following you like a quiet promise.